Hello everybody, welcome to Frame Trap. On this episode, I am proud to be joined by Ian Hink.
Hi.
And Daniel Bloodworth.
Hello.
I will be your host, Ben Moore. This is going to be a weird episode. You know, normally Frame Traps, it's like, oh, we talk about a bunch of different things, have some LOLs, and not take things too seriously. I think this is going to be an episode where it's a little bit more focused on heavier topics, and you need those. You need those in life sometimes. And so to maybe set the tone for this Frame Trap, my first question is, if you could change one thing about online discourse, what would it be?
Oh my gosh.
All of it.
All of it? So does that mean you would like just throw it away and start over, like get rid of the internet and then build it back again?
Thanos, the whole damn thing, yeah.
Oh, so like you snap and half of all Twitter users are gone?
No, you'd have to nuke it from orbit. You'd have to go aliens. It's the only way to be sure.
Okay. So everybody's gone.
I guess I would get rid of anonymity. If I had to change one thing, because it protects the trolls, but also like sometimes you need it to protect
people
who are in danger.
Yeah, who should be protected. Yeah.
Ugh, that's why no one solved this problem, because it's hard.
Interesting thing to think about, though.
Yeah, I guess you could take rage out.
Like
if you took out anger. Like if everyone just, like, you could be displeased, you could disagree, but if you weren't mad, maybe that's the secret. Just no more rage.
I feel like I'm just being this, well, what about this kind of jerk? But then you've got things that people should be upset about, right? That generate protests and injustices in our world.
Damn it.
Yeah. And
There's
it's like the only good response there is rage.
Well, I mean, that's kind of the conundrum I get in as well, because like for me, it's like, well, I feel like, okay, we need to have like some kind of cultural studies course so that people understand that like people around the world don't all have the same values and don't all see like, you know, everything isn't black and white, right? But at the same time, it's like, well, but there are things that other cultures think are okay that are not okay. Yeah. So it's like,
what about this? This popped into my head. What if there was just an "Are you sure?" prompt that came up before you engaged in online Discord? Like you type up whatever you're going to type up, and there's just a little box that comes up and it's like, hey, "Are you sure?" And it doesn't stop you from saying it.
Clippy pops up, is like, looks like you're about to write some hate speech. Yeah. Are you sure?
Right. Like, I wonder if that would dramatically improve things, because we all need it, right? Like we all get, we all say things that we're like, I shouldn't have said that. We're all imperfect.
I mean, we've I think we've talked about this like interpersonally before, but you know that race of aliens in Mass Effect that says their emotions before everything they say because they don't express emotion.
Right.
So like if everyone on the internet had to be like righteous indignation, like this makes me very upset, or like jokingly, like how dare you, you know. That would make things clearer. And there's no flip side to that coin. If everyone was just had to write out their emotions, you could still be mad when you had to be. And people would know if you're getting way too upset about Star Wars or whatever.
You know, another thing. What if there was like... Because I think part of the problem, right, is when you have access to something all the time... like you tend to get upset about more minor things, right? So like, you know, little things that you probably wouldn't be upset about if somebody gave you like a list of things. It doesn't seem as magnified. So what if it's like, all right, everybody can only be on you can choose when, but you can only be on for like an hour, you know? And so it's just like
parental controls for everyone.
Yeah. It's so weird because, you know, like we were saying with rage or anonymity, every suggestion I'm saying, it's like, oh no, like that could be super Orwellian and wrong at the same time.
Right.
So I'm not meaning this as like, seriously, let's do it. It's just a thought exercise.
Humanity's gotten too big for its britches.
Yeah.
we're meant to know like 100 people in our entire lifetime.
I think that is I
It's
totally
like that's what
agree.
the human brain is capable of handling.
Yes, I think
Anything beyond
so.
that.
Yeah, I mean, I actually
start to
do
break
think,
down
yeah, like
psychically.
with news and stuff like that, it's like there's stuff going wrong all the time because
Yeah.
you
Never
know
lets
about
up.
the whole world.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Okay, maybe a lighter question. If
Yeah, we're really diving right
yeah,
in.
we are. I tell you, this is gonna be a frame trap.
Damn you, Cyberpunk.
Damn you, Cyberpunk. The name of this episode is the Cyberpunk episode. I'm trying to be as explicit with the tone of this episode as I can be.
Man.
So we really are just living in a post-capitalist dystopian hellscape now.
If somebody came to you and they said, "Hey, we have a colony on Mars. There's about 1,000 people there. We will put you there for free," would you consider it?
Nah.
Probably not.
I think I would.
Yeah. Which 1,000?
You don't know. That's the risk you're taking.
Then certainly not.
I think I would consider it. I mean, I don't know. All right, like you never know unless you actually get presented such a heavy situation. But I
I
think
like air quite a lot.
Yeah, air and trees are good.
And trees, I really like trees. Like LA doesn't have enough trees for me. Like Mars ain't gonna cut it.
That's a good point. I think I'd be really. I think it's one of those situations where I'd be excited for a day, and then it'd be like, "Oh, it's just a bunch of red rocks," and then be really bummed out. That's a good point.
Maybe if it was like a 6-month rotation, I'd consider it.
Ooh, I like that. Then I think I would.
And if they were paying me,
I'm curious how long people that will go to Mars will stay there, because even 6 months seems like not that long for the amount of time you're going to take to get there and back.
Yeah. Well, and also like it's been 6 months of quarantine, and that seemed like an eternity. So 6 months on Mars might feel like a while.
Well, let's talk about Cyberpunk 2077. Obviously, I put my review up there, and I've been able, fortunately, to really get my opinions out there. And so I want as much as I can, and I'm bad at doing this, admittedly. I don't want to dominate the conversation. The reason I'm having you guys on is because you've also been playing it, and I really want to get opinions out there that are not my own. And so really just opening the floor up. What do you think?
It's fine. I'm one of the people in Easy Allies who didn't really love Witcher 3.
Mm-hmm.
I can see all the things that are good about it. It just wasn't really my style.
Mm-hmm.
So my expectations were pretty guarded going into this. Like I was hyped about some elements, but how to put this delicately, my faith in CD Projekt Red to be thoughtful or delicate was pretty low. And there are definitely a lot of stereotypical representations of people in this game. It isn't nearly as outright offensive as I thought it would be, at least not yet. I'm 24 hours into it, I think. But it still seems I'm I'm fairly early in the story, weirdly. So I don't know how long it's going to take me to beat this damn game.
It's interesting, Ian, because when I was reviewing it and we were scheduling out, like, okay, how long is it going to take for us to get our review out there? There was that story that, this is a 175-hour game. And so I think in our minds,
right,
we thought, like, just seeing credits would take a lot longer than it is. And it wasn't nearly as long as we expected. You can obviously still spend a ton of time in the game, but what we were anticipating was not necessarily what happened.
The mission I'm on right now, I can actually say because it was in preview materials, is the thing with the voodoo boys where you go through the mall and then you meet up with Brigitte and go into the black wall or whatever.
Yeah.
Like that's literally where I'm at right now.
Yeah, I haven't quite gotten to that point, but the funny thing is I put more time into the game than you have.
Oh, funny.
So,
well, and I've done a bunch of other stuff,
Yeah.
Like a bunch of stuff with Delamain and all these other characters. The other thing I would say is, like, I was super guarded about kind of the more socio-political aspects of this Polish game tackling one of my favorite genres, which my favorite thing about said genre is its deconstruction of capitalism and like its examination of individuality, and like they're not kind worlds, you know, they're not good, clean, polished worlds, but the one great thing about it is that you can really be yourself, because the system's going to chew you up and spit you out no matter who you are, you know. And that's pretty much true in this, I guess. I wish you could have more customization. You kind of said that in your review, like,
Right.
And that I think is my major disappointment. Like, I'm playing it on PC. My PC is very good. I have frame rate issues and some like things going to T-pose here and there, and yeah, like I'm trying melee, and so when driving and using my Mantis blades, the frame rate dips, you know, because it's not using all the cores on my Ryzen processor, I guess. But my main disappointment is that it's just an open world RPG, and there's not anything really like mind-blowingly, earth-shatteringly like revolutionary about it. Like, with all the hype around it and with all the years of development, I really thought it would be like a like when I saw the animation in Last of Us Part 2, I had like a whoa, like video games, like that felt pretty future. And there's nothing really in this that's done that for me so far. That's the negative stuff. I like the characters and the writing way more than I thought I would so far. And like when I feel my interest starting to wane, some new character twist or thing will happen and it'll pull me back in. And so far, the characters pretty across the board have been fairly consistent. I don't really try to talk to just random people on the street or anything. I know that that's been a complaint, that's kind of dry. I've never really tried it, so I don't know. But yeah, because that's one of the things with Witcher 3 that didn't gel with me really. And I know that's one of people's favorite things about Witcher 3. So I was worried that like just their writing style isn't my style, I guess. And this one definitely tries to be a little edgy, and the trailers got on my nerves with this game quite a bit, how they just said fuck like every other word. And I'm just like, guys, I get it. It's a cyberpunk reality. Like, cool it.
Yeah.
Like, just have a sentence. But yeah, I don't know. I could go on and on, but yeah, I like it. When I got to the end of your review, I actually said, holy shit, out loud. Because I didn't expect this game to get a 7.5, you know. Playing it and how buggy it is, and certainly considering the PS4 like the PS4 version is probably like a 2 because it just doesn't run. It's like garbage. Criminal, shouldn't have been released. But yeah, I mean, I was sitting in the like 8s, probably, on my experience, because I haven't had any real bugs yet. But that's the thing, is it's kind of just like, it's much, much less revolutionary than I thought it would be. And that maybe is kind of a disappointment. Like, if it were bug-free, I wonder if the gloss would trick everyone into giving it 10s, or if people would actually look through the veneer and just be like, oh yeah, it's a pretty good but very standard open world RPG.
I want to touch on your comment about the 7.5 because, you know, of course I've been seeing what people think of the review and stuff, and it's definitely been brought up that people do the thing, and they do this. They do this every time where they're like, "Wait, you gave this a 7.5, or is it really better than this game that you guys gave an 8?" And I get where they're coming from, and I get that impulse, but what I want to say is having done this for 7 years, I get from an audience perspective why it feels that way. But if you start thinking like that, you can create a situation where if you come up with all these reasons in your mind where it's like, well, it is actually better than this in some ways, but not in others, you just end up canceling everything out. You create an impossible situation, and you can't, right, when you're reviewing something kind of on its own merits, you can't constantly be afraid of like, well, I gave this an 8 or this an 8.5, because it is truly an impossible situation where.
Well, and a Cyberpunk 7.5 looks a lot different than a Puyo Puyo Tetris 2 8.5.
Right. there's also that, but it's like, you know, where do you draw the line? Because it's like, well, I gave that an 8, you know, 5 years ago when technology was completely different and expectations were completely different, and we were on different platforms, and, you know, what was revolutionary at the time may be pedestrian now, right? Like, so it is an exercise in futility, and I really believe that. And so I think you kind of just have to take things on their own merits. And just quickly going back to the review is, when I started playing Cyberpunk, I was extremely hot on it. Like, this is one of the best games of the year hot. And then the more that I played it, it's funny because the more that I played it, there were things that I became more impressed by. And I totally agree with your point about the characters. And I think this is one of the best examples where there really is no strong difference in quality between side activities and the main story, where I am enjoying both things in equal amount. And like, it's almost like, am I doing the main story because it's as well written, if not more well written than what you experience in the main story? And I really appreciate that, because I think we kind of get used to video games having side content, and we kind of give it a pass if it's not up to snuff. And Cyberpunk definitely has that, right? Like, there are a bunch of things on the map that are just kind of whatever and not that great on their own. But I think that's offset a little bit by having actual quests that you're going through that are extremely detailed and really go into depth with their characters.
Yeah, I found myself doing a side mission that felt like a detective story, like a Dashiell Hammett novel or something. I was like helping out this detective, and like the mayor had died or something.
Yes.
And this detective character that I was working alongside, you know, he's like the one good cop in a city gone bad, you know, kind of stuff. And I was just like, this one side dude, I'm like really into this character, and they got me pretty quick on him, you know. And that whole thing took less than an hour, I think. Well, and it was just like, this was really good.
What's interesting, Ian, and something I tried to bring up in the review is, I don't think you've seen that whole storyline yet. Like, you did. Oh,
probably, yeah.
You did that with him, like that kind of investigation, but he'll call you later on, and you'll get wrapped up. And that is something that I love, that I think Cyberpunk really excels at, is like, you think about so many RPGs, and the people that you're interacting with in that quest, their story begins and ends at that quest. But I think what Cyberpunk tries to do that is a little bit more meaningful is, just because you did a job for them doesn't mean that they're done with you. They'll try to form a connection with you, and they'll slowly start to trust you and let you into their lives a little bit more, you know, whether that's them being part of a clan or getting involved with their family or whatever it is. They'll kind of slowly open up to you. Maybe not exactly like somebody would in real life, but I think it's trying to approach that.
It's funny too, and something I have yet to see come to fruition in a lot of ways, but the Delamain quest I've kind of seen through to a pretty big moment. Maybe I don't know if it's the conclusion or not.
Too. Yeah, that's what I was thinking of.
But I remember in Witcher 3 or whatever, it's like, do you save this witch or kill her? You know, and then like later on that comes back or whatever. And the cool thing with this game, like to take that detective story thing as an example, you know, toward the end of it, you have a choice to be like, to discourage him from taking it to internal affairs or whatever, or to just let him do whatever he wants. And I'm wondering if that's one of those moments that will pay off later, and my choice will make a difference. And that's kind of what's cool about this game, is it seems like that kind of stuff is less obvious, where I don't necessarily know I'm making like this is a branching point, like choice always. It's at least I hope that they come back into play.
It's kind of a double-edged sword, because I agree with you that it's sort of nice that it's not like this, you know, binary, like, oh man, look at how much you've changed the story, and kind of like making it's just like you kind of respond in the moment, and then whatever happens, and you can't really tell, like the lines feel intentionally blurred. But I also think that works against it in the sense where you're like, did that do anything?
Right.
Um,
I equally wonder that. I'm like, am I having an impact here? I don't.
right.
I don't know.
For sure.
Blood, I want to give you a chance
Yeah, you
to
go.
speak as well.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's funny because, like we're saying, it's like, we'll talk all day about the mess this game is having, and then once we log out for the night, and then I'm go in and play the game for 4 hours or so, and like really am like having a pretty good time, and kind of like Ian was saying, like I'm on a higher end PC now that I just got put together, and so I'm seeing it with not like the highest ray tracing setting, but like the next to highest ray tracing setting, and like 60 frames per second, and so it looks really good, and it's very impressive on those levels of just the world and the amount of pedestrians and traffic and the amount of architecture and everything that's going on. Like that's like the city itself, and it is really the most impressive thing, just in terms of structure. But it's weird because I have this sense where I feel like simultaneously like overwhelmed at times, and that there's not enough at times.
Blood,
Absolutely.
perfectly.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I completely agree.
Because it's like, okay, there's all these different weapons and tools and stuff like that, but then like I get into it, and I still don't feel like my combat encounters are like that different from each other, or that I have that many options to really play with, like I would like in Deus Ex, for example, which is what basically I feel like this is the closest analogy to, is like a larger, more open world Deus Ex. And then similarly, like there are points where I can like go into a place through a vent here or there, but it's it's like usually just like one alternate way in, or from what I've come across, or maybe a couple sometimes, but it will be like pretty simple stuff to where it's like, okay, here's a vent and you're in, or there's a door downstairs that you break open. Although I did have a good moment where I came across a side mission in a part of town that I really wasn't leveled for yet, but I'm like, okay, I'll go do this, and I couldn't get in the door. I was like half the skill points to get in the door. There's a really like guard that I knew I wouldn't be able to kill on the other side. I'm like, okay, hey, can't do that. But I saw this fire escape, and I'm like, okay, I bet I can get into that. This is a very Deus Ex moment. And I'm like, all right, let me jump to it. Can't quite jump to it. I was like, what can I do? What can I do? I'll call my car. I got this big freaking like SUV, drove onto the fire escape, got on the ladder, got into the apartment, and the guards were still too much for me to handle, but by like shooting them and like creating a ruckus, then my target just started running out, and it was just an NPC with like one shot. I'm like, okay, run out the window, I'm gone, bye.
I think a part of my problem with Cyberpunk is I feel like those moments can definitely happen, but it seems to be the exception rather than the rule.
Right.
Yeah.
And I actually think it's really interesting because I did the preview for this, and then I did the impressions, and then obviously I have the final review. And I actually think you see a progression there that kind of emphasizes this point, because in the preview, I feel like I kind of talk about how cool it is that you do have so many options, right? Like you can sneak around, and that you can manipulate the environment to cause distractions or get into cameras or whatever. And that when things do go bad, like the shooting feels pretty good, and so you can engage with it. But the more that I played Cyberpunk, it's exactly like you were saying, Blood, that it just sort of feels like the same thing over and over again. And there's not really any variation in what you're doing to really drive home that because the game wants you to make choices, and it wants you to invest in your character. Like it wouldn't have the systems that it does if it didn't want you to take pride in that. But you have so many situations where you're like, I feel like it kind of doesn't matter what I choose here. And to what I'm saying is I am a stealth player, just like you are, Blood. Like I really enjoy kind of using my wits to sneak up on guys and get through a situation undetected. But the longer that I played Cyberpunk, the less satisfaction I had in doing that, because you take a sample size of that game, and you're like, there are so many situations where like enemies are just standing in one place looking at a wall. Like, of course they're not going to see you. Like, of course you're just going to be able to sneak up to them, kill them or non-lethally take them down and then put them in the container that's right next to them. That's not an interesting decision, and it's not about being difficult. It's just, I feel like with so many of the elements of the game, it's just kind of asking you to do the same thing over and over. And what it was asking you to do initially wasn't all that creative or interesting on its own. And there's not really a good sense of progression in the mechanics that you can heavily invest so much time in.
Yeah. And I feel like there's not, like, in terms of like a kind of stealth gameplay, I feel like there's not enough in the way of like traps or fun little things that you can set up, to where like you're creating a scenario where things go, like there's one hack that I've gotten that I've come to like, which is contagion.
I have that.
Yeah. And so that's cool because if there's a lot of guys close to each other, like you poison one and then it poisons the one next to it and it just kind of like spreads around. But like that's the like most like fun, like kind of creative way of.
But it never kills them, right? It just does like some damage and then they find out about you and then you have to kill them all.
Yeah, I don't think you like, maybe if you like really, get a more powerful variant or put a lot of skill points into that. But yeah, I haven't seen it necessarily outright kill anybody, at least not in one shot.
Well, that's kind of the thing with this game, though, Blood. Like you said before, it is kind of this interesting conundrum because it does feel simultaneously huge and riddled with possibilities and variables and stuff. But then I am constantly wondering, like, which corner I'm gonna go around and see behind the facade. Because like it simultaneously feels devoid of almost everything. Like the encounters feel very set up.
Yeah.
Like going through the mall in the Voodoo Boys section with the animals in there, the animal gang. Like it was very scripted or not scripted, but like, definitely a level. And like hacking the way they showed it beforehand, the impression that they gave for this game was that all over the place there were going to be like, all these avenues, like you were saying, like all these opportunities, like you can hack this robot, you can hack this bench press, you can hack this stuff. But it really seems more to be like, when we thought of an idea, you can do stuff like that, but it's the exception, like you said, Ben, rather than the rule. And like the hacking tools that you have, like I want this thing to be like Zelda Breath of the Wild, right? Where I have like a set of tools and can do wackadoo crazy stuff with it,
right? With
them. But really it's just like I have 7 different ways to do damage and they're all basically the same.
And they're all really like, powerful.
Or like kind of powerful. Like in my experience, everything kind of gets everyone like a 4th down, and then I just kill them with my mantis blades by mashing mouse button 1.
So that's, Ian, that is exactly something that I want to emphasize, and I think what you're saying is what I am trying to convey, because while I was playing Cyberpunk, there were these rare mantis blades that were really expensive, and I was super excited to get them. And I was like, okay, I'm going to go and do optional stuff just to make money to get these things that seem so cool.
This is exactly what I did.
That are out of my reach. And then I got them and I'm like, these are basically just like knives or other melee weapons I've already been using.
It's just 2 katanas at the same time.
Yeah.
Right?
And
which is cool.
And I think that sensation is kind of pervasive throughout the game, because I would have these moments where I would run into like a door or a vent or something and it's like, oh, you can't get in here, you don't have the stats. And I was like, oh no, like, is it going to be like way harder for me to get in, because I didn't go this way? And it would just be, I feel like I would just literally look to the left and it's like, oh no, I can just jump up here. Right.
Here's the option B.
Yeah. Right. And so I think that is kind of the thing, is like, of course you want to make it so that if somebody can't do something, there are other options for them. I just felt like those other options were so trivial and obvious that it kind of made whatever decisions I was making feel a lot less important. It's kind of what you were describing, where it's like, no matter what I do, it just kind of takes off a fourth of their health, where it's like, I feel like things kind of level out to a point where the decisions aren't exciting. And that is a problem in a game where you make so many decisions.
Well, and it's funny too with the stat-based stuff, because I mean, it's good advice, but at the same time, maybe it hurt my immersion, because Polygon or Kotaku or whatever had that article about like, here are a bunch of like tips for getting going. And one of the tips that really stuck with me was don't use skill points until you need them. And so I don't ever level up. I don't ever level up cool or tech or intelligence or anything unless I'm like in a dialogue option or faced with a door that's like, you need 8. And then I click I and I go, okay, boom, boom, boom. I have 8. Here we go. Like,
that's a really funny way to approach it.
But it's like doesn't seem to be a reason otherwise to do that, except for like once or twice I wanted a skill that I was too low for, so I did that for that reason. But
see, I would disagree with that, because in my experience, I would find that like those moments where it's like, oh, I need 8 and I don't have 8, to be so whatever. Like there would always be like an obvious another route that if you looked at the perk trees, you can kind of stack things in such a way where it's so ridiculous. So like early on, I was like, oh, I'm going to use handguns. And then I saw that the handgun perks were so powerful and stacked so well that I felt like pretty quickly I got to a point where I was just demolishing anything with a handgun because of just, crit damage or just like all of these different kinds of buffs that were super, super powerful.
I'm trying to do that with blades, because there are a lot of things in the blade tree where you can heal. Yeah, like you can basically Bloodborne it.
The blade perks are very powerful as well. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I just got the double jump though, so I'm
Ooh, yeah,
very excited about that.
So Blood, the double jump was interesting for me, because there were definitely times where once I was made aware that it existed, I'd be like, oh, this would be kind of useful. But it fell into like this awkward moment where it was like, it was never useful enough that I felt like I had to get it. And, again, that kind of goes back to everything that we've been saying about Cyberpunk, where I'd be like, oh, it'd be kind of cool to get up there, but I can just go this way and I don't need it.
Well, and that's the problem with games like this, right? Where it's like, because you have to solve for 6 different ways to do everything, it means that everything is only like at like level 3 of complexity. Whereas like if things were a way more specific kind of like solution case, it could be way more thought provoking and interesting.
Well, you talked about Breath.
Everything has to be just doable.
You talked about Breath of the Wild, and I think people just hearing that comparison will instantly get livid, but I do think there is a point there. I'm not saying that this or anything has to be like Breath of the Wild, but Breath of the Wild partly solves that problem through the much complained about weapon durability, right? Where because things will break and break relatively easily, that is a natural limiting factor. And you will have moments in the game that are not scripted where you will lose access to something and have to kind of switch to an option that is a little bit less comfortable. And so by doing that, and I'm speaking very generally here, there are exceptions and workarounds to everything, but through kind of that implemented system, you have these moments where it's like, oh, that kind of tried and true strategy, I can't lean on that anymore. And I think that's kind of what I wanted through Cyberpunk. And you don't have to solve that through weapon durability. I think other games solve this by, through enemy types and them being very resistant to something or whatever. Right. I think there are a bunch of different solutions to it. But the idea is like some decisions and strategies will be really effective in some scenarios, but not others.
Well, and also like when I brought up Breath of the Wild, I was also mainly referring to like the very specific tool set that you have. You've got stasis, you've got magnesis, you've got the bombs, you've got, whatever. Right. And you start with all of those. And obviously, Cyberpunk, very different kind of game than that. Like, this is more about character progression, and you want to have these unlocks. So it's not a perfect solution, obviously, for this game. But the positive to that kind of design mentality in Breath of the Wild is that, like, they know that there's like one or two solutions to every problem, but they're also aware that you can stasis this metal cube or whatever and like fling yourself to the end of the level. And they're like, hey, if you think of it, and I think about Talos principle as well, like having a limited set of capabilities sometimes can be more rewarding gameplay wise, because like, even if you're not really doing the intended solution, if you're stacking a bunch of weird boxes on top of a laser robot and it gets you to the end of the level, you still got to the end of the level.
Right.
Well,
and that kind of ingenuity and creativity is what games like this are meant to engender.
Well,
intentionally.
And I think you can have people be like, well, what if that's what this game is not trying to do? And I think with the way that it presents its choices and tries to keep you out of certain things, I actually think there's enough evidence in the game that it is trying to do that. And I think about like kind of the classic pen and paper stuff, right? Like, picking a wizard, right, is a really interesting choice because, and I'm not trying to get into specific editions of D&D for a reason, so just bear with me for the sake of argument, but picking a wizard would mean that, like, you're very, very limited at level 1, right, where it's like, you will, if something sneezes on you, you will die, and you can only cast so many spells, but if you stick with it and you kind of suffer for a while, you eventually become extremely powerful, capable of manipulating things in a way that other characters can't, right? And so it's kind of, that is sort of the payoff there. Or I think about in RPGs where maybe you invest heavily in persuasion, right? Where you may get into a combat encounter, especially early on, and really struggle in a way that somebody who invests in weapons wouldn't, but you get to the last boss and maybe you can just talk your way out of it, right? And so those rewards are really satisfying because they put you in situations that are uncomfortable on purpose. And I think that is what Cyberpunk is lacking, is there weren't enough times where I really felt that consequence.
I did come across I don't know if you came across this quest or not. It was a pretty small quest, but these guys, I sat down at the bar in a diner or something like that, and these guys came in to stick the place up. And
I don't think so, no.
Yeah, and so basically I was able to use my street kid, one of my street kid options in the dialogue tree, to basically freak them out and be like, hey, you guys, are you part of the gang that's running this part of town? Because if they know that you're on their turf, like, they're gonna come after you. And then they got freaked out and they stopped sticking up the joint.
That is really cool.
Funny.
Yeah.
That's nice.
I feel like I had an experience like that where there's a character, Pan Am, who's a nomad, and because I chose the nomad background, like, I'm not sure how this conversation goes with the other backgrounds, but sometimes I do think
we've got all three represented here, so we can probably answer that.
I do think the illusion sometimes can be just as valuable, and the way that the game presented it to me is I felt like because I was also a nomad, I could kind of communicate and say like, hey, no, I get you because I've experienced it in a way that was really, really effective. It's like, and I loved that. I was like, oh, because I have this background, even if you're tricking me, it seems like I'm able to just kind of talk to this character in a way that I couldn't. It was really cool. And I don't know if you've talked to that character, if you've had that experience being different backgrounds.
I've only seen her in passing. Okay. Like, I went in to talk to Rogue, and I haven't paid her the 15,000 credits or whatever to move that story forward. I
have done that.
But I saw her walking out then, and I was like, oh, maybe I can, talk to her and do something now, but she was just gone.
I've done the first mission with her, and she just called me a second time, but I haven't done that one yet.
Okay. Yeah, I'd be interested to see how much that changes.
But yeah, it would be interesting, like you're saying, Ben, with like builds and advantages and disadvantages. Like, it would be interesting if different backgrounds like favor different weapons or something like that, you know, like
Right.
if a nomad was really good with a shotgun or a sniper rifle, or
Right.
if a street kid was better with submachine guns, or you know, if corpos are just they had the money to get trained up with katanas, and so they were super
Yeah,
good.
yeah.
I think you could go even farther than that, where it's like if you're a nomad, like you're the only one that can like maybe modify your car to
Right.
like have guns on it or something, or like if you're a corpo, like you have access to restricted areas that like you either couldn't get in if you chose other backgrounds, or you know you'd have to work very 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 hard to do so. And um, at the same time, I do understand the argument against that, where it's like I want to choose this because it is immersive to me. I don't necessarily want to think of the mechanical repercussions. And you do run into situations like that, and sometimes with games where you're like, I vibe with this thing really well, but practically it doesn't offer me anything. And that can kind of be a frustrating conundrum. I do think there's probably a middle ground there, but I get that argument.
Yeah. Well, I also kind of feel like, I feel like a lot of times, you know, the developers, you know, like they pride themselves in like, well, we don't want to hold your hand, but like you've got like that one combat tutorial that that you get, and it's like, okay, here's stealth and hacking and combat, and there you go. And I feel like there's a lot of other options that are on the table that you really don't get introduced to that well. You know, like, you know, you have to, you know, specifically seek out like a Netrunner shop to see that,
Right.
like, oh yeah, there's a lot of different things that I can do with hacking, other than just like distracting guys and making them blind. And then sort of similarly with the guns, it's like I've picked up so many guns, but like there's a stupid firing range next to the apartment that you can only go into when there's like you get a phone call from the guy that owns it. Like, can I just go in that firing range and like test my guns out for a little bit? Let me figure out which of these I really like, because again, it's like the combat scenarios, they're kind of small and quick in a way, to where it's like I'm not gonna like try out like 10 different guns in one combat scenario.
Right.
I'm gonna try two and like, okay, did I like that? I guess I'll go to another one, and then I end up hanging on to the same couple of guns, but my backpack's full of like 20 more
Right.
that I've never even fired off once.
And that is exactly the problem, because the game definitely doesn't bring that stuff to light in a very effective way. And on some level, you know, you do want to discover things and experiment on your own, but I feel like I kind of had that moment that you did, Blood, where I was like, oh, there is more that I can do with hacking. Like there are a bunch of quick hacks that you could get, and then like investing in making my deck bigger so I could have more quick hacks installed, and then it just not really changing combat all that much or making it that much more exciting because the scenarios were still like too simple. You know what I mean? Like I just feel like it wasn't putting situations in there to really let that stuff shine. And then that in turn kind of changes, like it dampens your enthusiasm for exploring that stuff. And then the natural argument is, well, why don't you bump it up to hard or very hard? And that doesn't really change things in an interesting way. You just die quicker. Like it doesn't make the situations that you're in
and
more
also
interesting.
like in my opinion, like for a game to be worthy of changing up a higher difficulty, it has to run right and be like fair.
Yeah.
And like as someone who's trying to go melee, like I only have a sniper rifle and my mantis blades equipped because those are the only two things I ever need. Those are the only two scenarios I'm ever in. I'm either far away and have to kill someone, I stealth them and knock them out, or I mantis them to hell, to pieces. But like so many times, like I invested to get 30% damage reduction in explosions because so frequently I will be fighting people with melee and then just explode because there was a canister to my right that I didn't even see, and I hit it with my sword or my Manus Blades and exploded. And like that's happened to me like 4 or 5 times on the last dude, and then I have to do all of them again. And so I'm quick saving like crazy now, and also I look for explosive things first.
Right.
And like that isn't fun, really. I don't know.
I will say where they do kind of push back a little bit more is with the cyber psychos. Like when you come across those, like
I only fought one and I was way over leveled, I think, because I killed him immediately.
Oh, really?
I was like a sniper, and I literally just sprinted at him.
Have no business fighting. Like, so I think that's part of it. Is maybe I'm like going in it like against guys that I'm underleveled against, and so I'm like, all right, I got to really figure this room out.
So, well, the leveling system is a joke. Like in my experience, if you like, I've literally wandered into the wrong part of town and like walked by a guy that got mad at me and killed me like instantly, and I was just like, what like, you know?
Yeah, so that's actually what I was going to say, that I wanted to push back against the cyber psychos thing. And admittedly, I did not do all of them, but my experience was kind of similar to Ian's, where it was very black or white, where I would either get into a fight with one of these guys and it would just be over so quickly, and I felt like I just kind of did a point and shoot, or I would be so under leveled that they would obliterate me. And it didn't, I wasn't like, oh man, you know, I really thought my way through that, or really, you know, did something skillfully there. It was just like either too easy or too hard, just based on the danger level of it, in a way that this just wasn't interesting. Like there wasn't anything mechanically that they were bringing to the table.
Well, and this actually highlights one of the realizations I had about this game that made me reconceptualize what kind of game it is. And kind of in line with what I was saying earlier about Breath of the Wild and stuff, and like from what I understand about Deus Ex, where it's like, you know, you have 2 or 3 different paths you can take through most places. When I saw that this game had leveling, like, and it worked like that, and like enemies and areas and missions could say like danger level low or moderate or high or very high or whatever. It, to me, that kind of stuff flies in the face of immersion in a strange way, because it's very just artificial.
It is, yeah.
To me, it isn't something like, immediately made me recontextualize this game as, oh, this is not like an immersive sim. This is not a living world where I can use my own grit and moxie and get through stuff on my wits alone. It's like, no, if I'm not meant to be somewhere in the story yet, I'll get destroyed. And that's the kind of game this is, which is fine. It's just not the kind of game I thought it was from the advertising and stuff. I'm not mad about it. It was just I had to recontextualize what this game was in my head. And the hour-long presentation I saw at E3, like the second time they did it, kind of did that. It started that. It like crumbled the veneer for me a little bit, where I was like, oh, it's just a game. You know, like I thought it was going to be like the revolutionary, and it's not.
You did say something though that I want to touch on. You know, because I think people will talk about this conversation and be like, oh, you just wanted it to be something that it wasn't trying to be. And seeing Cyberpunk before release and the way in which they talked about it, I do think it was trying to accomplish what we say it's trying to accomplish. And
they said it was.
Yeah. And you know, we're kind of talking about other games and how they may exceed mechanically where Cyberpunk fails, but I think the thing that is surprising in a positive note to Cyberpunk, and something that a lot of the games that we're talking about are terrible at, or certainly not as good at, is the way that Cyberpunk explores things. Like, I was not expecting to go to a funeral and have that
Right.
moment,
Yeah.
be so thoroughly explored, right? It wasn't just there to be like, oh, this person died. It was like getting to go up and to talk to people and getting different perspectives on what just happened, and then trying to make you as the player be like, okay, well, how are you emotionally dealing with this? What is your response to this moment? It wasn't just a cutscene. It was like, let's talk about what it's like to go through this and live through this death. And it's not just that, I'm just pulling out one example here, but there are so many moments in Cyberpunk where they sit down and kind of explore a topic, and they don't over sensationalize it. It is totally okay with just you kind of sitting down and then giving you options to pick and talk about. There's a quest that deals with somebody's struggling with faith in a way that it has to be one of the better examples of wrestling with faith that I've ever seen in a game. Like, certainly not the only one.
I haven't done that one.
Yeah, but it's really, really good. And I think it approaches it with kind of this honesty that really just lets you think to yourself, okay, what do I think about this situation? And you can walk away kind of feeling like, I don't have to think this way or the other way. Like, we could come to different viewpoints on it, and the game is creating that space. And so I do think in the writing of the game and in the side quests that they specifically chose to construct, they are constantly exploring different and worthwhile things that is nuanced in a pretty good way. And I think people hear that and they're like, well, what about this or what about this? It's like, it's not perfect. I don't think it's doing everything right, but it is trying. And I think it is trying in a way that games don't oftentimes. And so it's so hard to kind of take that and acknowledge it and then look at the gameplay or technical sides of this game and not seeing that in the same way.
Well, I mean, take this, I didn't love Witcher 3, so there's that, but I found the gameplay in Witcher 3 to be pretty bad. And this game, I find the gameplay to be fine, but in both games, the stuff I liked the most were the characters and those little interactions and those kind of explorations like you're talking about, Ben. So, like, to me, and granted, limited sample set here, but like, that seems to be CD Projekt Red's real strong suit. In addition to making like a visually interesting and complicated and large game world, the gameplay just gameplay is like a 2, or, well, that's way too low, but gameplay is like a 4 and characters are like an 8 or a 9. And yeah, I find myself wishing that gameplay were at least a 7 or an 8, but so far the characters are what's keeping me in it.
Right.
And that's fine. Like, that's fine for a game like this, I think, especially a lengthy story heavy game, But if that wasn't there, yeah, this game would just fall flat entirely, I think.
Well, I think even the comparison to The Witcher isn't. I get what you're saying, and I agree with it even. But with The Witcher, it's like you are playing this one specific character. This is his job, and he just does this job a certain way. And it's not that you don't have any options or an array of tools, but it is kind of contextualized as you are this single thing. Whereas in Cyberpunk, you get to not only create somebody, but explore all of these different options. And so I think naturally it does kind of create a different expectation for how those decisions are going to play out. And it's like with anything, if you do give people an option, you want that option to be interesting and worthwhile and rewarding. And when it's not that, that's when it becomes a problem.
Yeah. And I mostly was referring to, like the gameplay in both is just a little clunky.
Oh, that's true. I mean, I agree with that. Yeah.
So not so much about like player option, but just like the literal act of playing it is clunky. And like bugs aside, like, I'm trying to kind of project my mind forward a couple of months to when like the bugs are fixed.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, on a big computer that runs well, you know, I haven't had that many. But even so, I think, you know, bug free, this game's, you know, still got some issues, like some pretty big issues.
I agree. Yeah. I know people mean well when they do this. And it certainly doesn't anger me, but I don't think it's a productive question, because people, like, someone asked me, they're like, okay, so in a theoretical world, if this game had no bugs, what would you give it? And it's like, I get what you're saying, and that is a very good question, but I think it runs the danger of, like, trying to, like, all I can do,
putting a numerical value on bugs,
right? Like, all I can do is evaluate it
Right.
now, you know, like, I think
Right.
it is dangerous, because you could do that with anything, right? Like, you could take that and be like, well, you know, if theoretically they make this DLC that does this, and it's like, you know, that question is coming from such a well-intentioned place, but it's like, all I can do is right now in this moment. And I agree with you, Ian. I think some people look at the score that we give it, and it's just like, oh, well, they're just mad about the bugs. And it's like, I am mad about the bugs. That is true. It is part of why it got the score that it did, but it is certainly not the only part. And I think that is what you're trying to say, is
absolutely,
it is not, that is far from the only criticism.
Well, and you have to, it's a funny and not a direct kind of a thing, but you could find yourself in a similar situation. I could imagine in a game where it's like, let's say it has like one really offensive thing in it, you know, and you could get into a situation where people would be like, well, if that really offensive thing wasn't there, it's like a 10, yeah? And you're just like, well, it's kind of immaterial. Right. Like, it doesn't really matter, right? It is what it is. This is the package.
Yeah. I think the other thing that we were talking about a little bit the other day, Ben, is just it feels like I wish there were more things to do that were not just quests.
Yeah. Right.
You know, we talked about the surprise of walking up to those arcade machines or the pachinko machines and like, oh, I can't actually do anything with this right here. Like, it's just,
right.
You know, it's just a sprite that's going to loop over and over. And like, I could see, you know, not that it would have to go to like having all the kinds of crazy stuff that Yakuza would have, but just having more just sort of just little fun side activities, or, you know, even something, you know, say something like, kind of like Persona, where like you could use your phone to call up those people and say, hey, do you want to go get a drink? Do you want to go out, you know, to this restaurant? Do you want to, you know, go just hang out, you know, by a pier somewhere, just whatever, you know, and just like have a lot more of these like optional moments that are there for you to do without like, oh, I'm going to drive to this fixer and like have the one line of dialogue or whatever.
Yeah.
You're totally right. Yeah.
But I think when we were talking about it privately, a comparison that you made that I thought was really good is you mentioned Witcher 3 and Gwent, and you know, Witcher doesn't have like this crazy amount of interactivity, right? Like, it's not like you can just interact with every single thing that you see while you're exploring a town or whatever. But even just having Gwent, even having that one mini game, adds so much, right? And it just becomes this kind of thing where you can pause and talk to somebody, and it was another way that you could get to know the world. And it's not that I think, like you were saying, Blood, we expect Cyberpunk, like, oh, it has to have playable arcade machines. It's not that we're trying to convey. It is just that the world feels static in a way that it shouldn't, right? Like, you can't quite engage with it in a way that it seems like it's trying to present itself to you as, like, you know, people have brought up that, like, it's weird that you can't even change your hair, or
right.
It's like when you go to eat something, it's just like just a menu pops up, and it's like none of those things are.
Or the Ripper Doc, like I expected to have to go through an animation like ripping my legs off every time, but you don't.
Right. Yeah. Or even, you know, like you install all this cyberware, but it has no impact on how you look.
Right.
Yeah.
And it's not like any of these little instances are like all that bad or egregious on their own, but it all kind of adds up to this feeling of like, it seems like maybe I should be able to do this, and that it's just kind of a weird feeling to wrestle with.
It's interesting because I find myself thinking about the nature of open world games, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, let's as a thought exercise, let's put on one side of the spectrum LA Noire, right, which is ostensibly an open world game, but in practice is basically a linear narrative in an open world. Pretty much.
Right.
Like
There's
the
a little
original
bit of stuff
Mafia
you can
is
do.
kind of similar, yeah.
Right. Where it's like you're in this place, you can drive wherever you want, but really we're just here to do this story. And then on the other side of that, again, I'll bring Breath of the Wild is on my mind, so I'll just say that. But like, that's an open world game whose core functionality really kind of depends on your curiosity and seeing something and being like, oh, whoa, I wonder what's over there. And then you find a shrine or a person in the woods or whatever, or a cause, And those two poles, I think Cyberpunk exists somewhere in between, definitely, but closer to LA Noire maybe than to Breath of the Wild in its nature, because
I don't know that I agree with that.
Well, because, and at least maybe this is just me, and like maybe this is a testament to the story and the writing, but I haven't found myself driven to explore too much in this game, and maybe that's because it's so visually dense, and like the menus and the world and everything, they're just so filled with things that my eyes can't parse out something to be interested in. I just like see city and I'm like, okay, I'll just do the story and go to the waypoints and go do this, stop this assault in progress to get some money or whatever. But like, it feels like a midpoint between maybe those two games, because it has a lot of like Assassin's Creed style, like a lot of things on the map to do.
Yeah.
But really, we're here to tell this story and do these missions and these really robust side missions, obviously way more than LA Noire.
Right. I do think it's a really valuable exercise that you're trying to bring up. And I think I definitely agree with the sentiment that you're trying to say. But I think the problem that Cyberpunk runs into, and admittedly, it has been a very long time since I've played through LA Noire, so I may be misremembering it in a certain way. And I do think there are plenty of things to criticize in LA Noire. But while there is an open world that is not really used in the way that open worlds are typically used, by having a lack of things, I think it naturally places the focus on the story. So I think the sparseness, while you could be critical of it, and I think there's a point there, it is kind of naturally, through its own design, driving you a certain way. In Cyberpunk, there are so many dots on the map, and so then I think fairly you kind of want to explore them and you want to do them, because not only are there dots on the map, but like we were saying, there are things to work for, there are things to buy, there is a consequence of that system. But I think all of that stuff is just very shallow in a way that I think is super fair to criticize. Like how annoying is it
kind of
that people constantly keep calling you to buy cars? Like,
yeah, it's like, I got the Akira motorcycle, and driving a car in this city is annoying. I'm not using a motorcycle. I'm done. But I've got it.
But it's like I feel like when you are in the quests, the game does such a good job of trying to present these characters naturally and as like real human beings that would react this way given the situation. It's so frustrating that like you immediately get out of one of those moments and you get like this annoying like, hey, want to buy this sweet ride? It's just like, even with what you are trying to present, there is an obvious better way to present it. And so I think that
it's a noisy game.
Yes.
In every sense of the word. It's audibly noisy, and there's a lot of signal to noise in it, and visual noise. But I think that's kind of what I was trying to say, Ben. Exactly. Is like, there are so many check boxes on the map, so many things to go do, but then you realize after doing 3, 4, 5 of them that they're the same. They're samey. And unless you need money, they're just there to serve a utility. So then, unless it's a side gig, or the main story, like those are the reasons you're there. not exploring this world, not living in this, not inhabiting an immersive sim, but you're here to do the main story and 20 or 30 really good side stories. This is not a criticism. Mm-hmm. I'm just saying this is what this game is, and that it's not what I thought this game would be before getting into it. And I mean, we don't have time maybe to get into a discussion about hype and advertising campaigns and that kind of a thing. But it is kind of a strange situation where I don't know, like it's hard because you want to sell your game, you want to hype people up for your game, but how do you not overpromise with a game like Cyberpunk? Because how do you not describe the world philosophically and narratively without also implying all kinds of gameplay stuff that aren't really in it,
Well, it's not just that, right? Because it is also precedent where this game, like, this is coming after The Witcher 3, which is arguably one of the defining games of the last several years, right? And really did push things forward in such a way. And naturally, when you have that happen, fairly or unfairly, people are going to have very high expectations, right? And so when you say Cyberpunk from CD Projekt Red, that's going to be a very different... You're going to have different feelings than if it's like, oh, hey, this developer I've never heard of is making a Cyberpunk game. That doesn't mean that you are trying to be unfair, but that is how anything works. That is why, like, when people market a movie from a famous director, they make sure it's from that famous director. And if they are especially if they are leaning on that reputation, it doesn't feel unfair to have that expectation going into it from a consumer level, right? Like, a lot of people are buying this because of the reputation that CDPR has.
Absolutely. Remember that period of time where they were hiding the fact that M. Night Shyamalan was directing him? Like, they wouldn't put his name on the previews anymore?
But that speaks exactly what I'm talking about,
That's
right?
exactly what you're talking about. That's what I'm saying. Is like, I was in a theater when his name came up and people started laughing, and I was like, oh boy.
It's so weird though, because it's like we talked about all this stuff, and like there's a lot of these criticisms we talk, and like I that I agree with, and yet at the same time, like I'm actually pretty obsessed with just wandering around this world and absorbing things and exploring and
I mean, clearly you've got more hours in it than I do, and you haven't done like 3 or 4 big missions that I've done. So
like doing the Delamain quest, where you end up like they shoot you out to all these different parts of town, and I'm like, do I want to do this yet? Because I haven't been to these parts of town. But then it's like, oh, this looks really different. It's like it's really easy to feel like Night City looks basically like the area you start, but there are all of these other branches and spokes to it, and it's like I did another quest for like you basically in like this kind of like kind of shanty town kind of area, and then obviously like you pointed out the trash dump outside. And so I'd seen a glimpse of that, and I'm like, okay, well, we need to get this shot for the review. So I picked up some stuff for Ben while he was working on his Hall of Greats presentation. And I went out there and like, where's the trash pile Ben's talking about? Oh, okay, cool.
Here it is.
Let me find the best spot to get a shot of this. But
well, and you go ahead.
No, Blood, 100%. I'm so glad I'm having you guys on, because I do agree with you, where I absolutely have all of these criticisms, and this was such a hard game to review, because I think in one sense of this phrase, it's absolutely true. I love this game, and even in the conversation, there were certain characters, like Ian, you mentioned the character Rogue, and I think about, like, I really love that character. I really cared about them. And there are multiple characters that I can think of where it's like, I really cared about these characters on a deep level. And on one hand, I really do. I am infatuated with this world. Like, there would be so many moments where I'd be in a scene or looking at something and I'd be like, this is so immaculately constructed.
Yeah.
And
I'm thinking about playing it right now.
yeah, and
Yeah, well, the weather, like I didn't start seeing weather until the last couple of nights that I played, and then like
Oh, funny.
once you start getting that like Blade
I feel like it
Runner
rains all the time.
it's like what? And then I had like some sandstorm or smog or something come through, and just like everything looked different, and like you had the rays from the sun coming through and diffusing, and it was just like the world looks entirely different now because of this weather that I hadn't seen before for whatever reason.
but that's the thing, and I think this is something that everyone goes through, and I go through this, not just as a critic, but also as a fan, where you have those moments where you're, completely enchanted, and I think once you get that way, there's a part of your brain that wants to write those criticisms off, right? And you want to be like, oh, it's not that bad, or oh, it's not that big of a deal, and it's like, oh yeah, it exists, but all these other cool things exist. That is a very human impulse, and I think that is something that really taking our time with the review helped combat. Is it kind of, once that impulse happens, if you give yourself enough time, other thoughts pop up where you're like, okay, yeah, but like that really is a problem, and it's getting harder to ignore, and it's affecting all these other things. And I think just kind of giving yourself some space to really sit down and think through it thoroughly, you allow not only yourself to love the game, but also accept all of the problems that it has.
Exactly.
And I think that's an important step.
You're totally right. And like, I wonder if it's a problem that we have, or I think no, because like people on Twitter and stuff, ask us about GOTYs enough, and like there's the Game Awards that had 83 or 8.3 million. I'm unclear on how many million viewers it had, but a lot. And it's this obsession with perfection and like what's the game of the year, and like what's this, and like a game like this obviously going to come up in that conversation because it's just. It had the marketing dollars to be relevant, whatever.
Well, the reputation, like Ben was saying.
And yeah, obviously, I was just kind of joking, but like, there's a true freedom. And Ben, you began this entire conversation by asking if you could take something out of the internet, what would it be? Mm-hmm. And there's a true freedom to not needing something to be perfect.
Yes,
and to just like you said, like, I'm enjoying this game. It's not the best game I've ever played.
Right.
Certainly it's not my favorite game. And there's a lot of things about it I don't like. And there are a lot of things about it I really do like.
Yes.
And I don't need it to be anything other than that, And I'm always a person, like, I think I have a reputation for disliking a lot of stuff. And, like, I do think I am maybe a harsher critic about a lot of things. And I have really specific tastes, and I like stuff and don't like stuff. But like, that's the beauty of video games is if you're not enjoying something, you don't have to play it. Like, you could stop. And if you are enjoying something, even though it's a 7.5, that's fine too. And yeah, a game like this, you can find a lot of stuff to dislike and a lot of stuff to like if you can get over your need for rage or for perfection, or like, if you don't have to be mad at it,
I think
you can just like it or dislike it.
Ian, what you're saying is so on point and so beautifully said. The only thing that I would add to it is you're talking about rage and acceptance. I think actually, like, the perfect word here is validation, where people will have emotions on something and they need it reflected back to them to such a degree that if it is not, they can't accept their own feelings on something.
Right. I mean, I would say, by and large, if your thoughts and words and deeds are not causing harm, or illegal, they're pretty much valid. Like, as long as you're not like out there spreading hate or hurting people, you can think what you want. I
think a really good example of this is The Last of Us 2 and the conversation that surrounded that, because I think you had a lot of people that really cared about Joel and Ellie and were really, really, truly and wholeheartedly in love with those characters. And those characters went in a direction that they didn't like, that disappointed them or made them feel sad or hurt them in some way. And I think those are valid feelings. It was how that disappointment was expressed, where it was like, I have to destroy it, that it became a problem.
Or like the reaction in the, like, I haven't really done it, but I'm sure if you read the comments section of our spoiler mode, wherein I was, talking a lot about my thoughts and feelings about Last of Us Part 2, it's like, I think it's easy to focus on that I didn't super like the narrative and that I don't have a past really with Joel and Ellie, even though I know the story of the first game, and it's really easy to gloss over the fact that I think that game is best in class accessibility, best in class animations, best in class, like, really best graphics on the PS4, possibly. Like, there's so many incredible things about Last of Us Part 2, but it's very easy to focus on, like, criticisms about narrative and gameplay design. And it's just an interesting aspect of our jobs is that interpersonal stuff comes into it, and like my personality and my presentation and things like that obviously come into it as well. But I'm honestly like the kind of person, like, with a game like Last of Us or Cyberpunk, it's like, yeah, I like, there are a lot of things I like, a lot of things I don't like, and it's like it comes out to a median point, and like, unless it's Last Guardian, I'm not gonna get super pissed about it.
Well,
that game is fucking trash. Though.
See, there you go. That's what I want to say.
I'm just kidding.
No. It's a good point. It's exactly what I was gonna say. Is the danger, I think, of having a platform like this, or one of the dangers, not the danger, but one of the dangers of having a platform like this, and we do run into it, right? Is you sound like you're preaching or like wagging your finger, and it's like, you can't make these mistakes or represent things that way. Like, I've totally talked about things, like I think about some of the ways that I've talked about Final Fantasy 13 or the ending of Game of Thrones, and it's like, I was mad, and I probably expressed that anger in ways that, like, in retrospect, I wish I wouldn't have, and everyone does that, right? And so that is something that I want to communicate, is just because you do have moments of reflection or clarity, it doesn't mean that you're not susceptible to the same things that you complain about. And I think recognizing that is important.
There's a huge difference between passion and vitriol. Right. Like, I can be passionate about disliking certain elements of Last Guardian or Last of Us Part 2, but it's not hateful. Even if my, like, tone of voice might sound like that sometimes, or anyone. I'm using myself as an example here because it's an easy one to draw to. But I think that everyone has this issue where it's like, when impassioned, one can sound very angry. Right. But if you're not directly attacking people, you can be passionate about disliking a work, but as long as it doesn't cross that line into death threats and rage and that kind of stuff, it's part of
accusations,
criticism.
Right? Like all the accusations that have flown around that game.
Yes. Oh yeah. And that's the aspect of the internet that I think is unfortunate and unnecessary. And I'm sure it's such a multifaceted issue. But I mean, like, to bring things back around to Cyberpunk, to take, for example, the issue with the PS4 and Xbox One edition of this game, like, I think that is a situation where people are justifiably angry, because, like, they spent money and on a product that does not work, right? And, like, should not have been put out in that state. Like, we all expected this game to be a hot mess, but we didn't expect it to be that hot of a mess.
Even expecting something to be a hot mess, though, doesn't excuse it.
No. But it's just like, we expected it to be a hot mess because Witcher 3 was a hot mess when it came out.
Right.
You know, like it's part of that pedigree and like it's like the ongoing joke about Bethesda games, right? It's like
yeah. Well,
the
yeah. I
first
mean,
month-
there's just like a level of open world complexity. You know, that it's there's
be
only so
expected.
much that you can do in QA. But
Yeah.
that's a whole different story. Like there's just the level of severity is just in a completely different ballpark. Yeah.
Yeah, the fact that it got out the door at all, in some of these cases, even on PC, honestly, is like playing it on my PC is probably about as buggy as this game should have been. Like I haven't had any game breaking problems, but it's still kind of buggy and framey and doesn't run great and
cell
people
phones
T-pose
floating.
randomly. And random stuff floating around and like those are all like funny haha bugs but tolerable, right? Whereas like unrecognizable human faces and stuff like that is like you don't take money for that. Like
Yeah.
yeah.
And this is something where I think it is purely subjective because you're always going to get different camps of acceptance for that. Where some people are like, this is completely unacceptable and I can't play it in the state that it's in. And you're going to get other people being like, this isn't that bad. I've played much worse, blah, blah, blah. You're always going to get that. It's varying and there is no right answer.
I mean, to be clear, I think games should be, you know, much more polished than even my experience of this game when it comes out.
Yeah.
But,
well, I mean,
but playing the
bugs are oddly a thing that, you know, not everybody experiences.
Right.
Although a lot of the ones that I've come across, like I describe it and like, oh yeah, I got that one too. So like, it's like
it is
that's
funny,
that's the kind of level where I'm like, okay, if more people are getting across the same bug, there's a problem.
Well,
it's not some random thing.
I think when I review something, there's always that moment of like, okay, you know, this is buggy. How much is it affecting my enjoyment? And you kind of have that tipping point. And in my own evaluation, I definitely think Cyberpunk crossed that tipping point for me, where I was like, this is so widely buggy that it is absolutely impacting my enjoyment of the game.
Yeah. I mean, for me, that line is very often lost progress.
Sure.
Like, if things are... I think I'm probably more tolerant of frame rates than maybe even the rest of you guys are. Just because, I don't know, I think maybe it's because of being a video editor. I'm so used to watching video at like 2 or 3 times speed that my brain just kind of like moves past it. I'm like, it's fine, it's there. But I don't know why, but yeah, I people T-posing and stuff and floating purses and things like that. I'm like, all right, whatever. But yeah, if my time is stolen, that's when I start to get mad.
It's weird because I think like, anyway, we probably, I know I don't want to cut this conversation off because I think it's been so good, but we've been going for a very, very, very long time. And
hour and 23 minutes.
There are actually other parts of the show that I kind of want to talk about. Sort of it's not entirely this, but there'll be a later part in the show where we sort of talk about the response to the problems of Cyberpunk 2077. And then we got an email, I think, that asks us about kind of the social issues surrounding Cyberpunk 2077. I don't know why I needed to say the full title there, but we got it. And I do want to get into that stuff there because I have more to say, but I think we all need a breather. Even though I'm realizing that I constructed this show in such a way where it won't quite be a breather.
Yeah, we're gonna get into the hard stuff. It sounds like.
But Blood, are you familiar with our one sentence game we do here on Frame Trap?
I've seen it, but I don't know if I remember it off the top of my head.
Okay, so I am going to give you a company. And you get a maximum of 10 words. Like you get an opportunity to speak to the person that is most possible of change, right? Where like they have the most influence. This is a hypothetical scenario. This is roll with me here. And you get to say a maximum of 10 words to them. I did just talk about us needing a breather, but the company I've picked will not really allow for that because I'm going to give you one sentence to say to CD Projekt Red. You could talk to him right now. What would you say?
Well, I right right now. Well, I think the thing is I come back around too because I just retweeted it and re-quoted myself. But it's like, yeah, it's like you have to wait to announce your date.
You have to wait. You have to wait to announce
I like that it
your
rhymes.
date.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think you're there.
I've said it before, but yeah. They started this campaign. They started this project with, it's coming when it's ready.
When it's ready, yeah.
And it's not.
Yeah.
It's not.
It just isn't.
When did the shareholders or whoever get in the way of that? Because that was the right mentality, and then they put a date on it and delayed it 3 times, and it still wasn't ready.
There's a lot to say to CD Projekt Red right now, Blood, but I think that is a very good thing to say. So not only did you come up with that super quick, I think I would struggle.
I mean, that's not the first time. It's like the third time I've said it.
Sure, that's fair. We have been talking about this a lot, but
you're not wrong.
You did a good job. This little pause in the show, this little one-sentence game is brought to you by some wonderful shout-out to your patrons. If you want to find out more about this, go to patreon.com/easyallies. But the basic summary is we shout you out on all of our podcasts, and we have quite a few of them. And so Ian and Blood, what I'm going to do is I'm going to read all of these names, and at the end, I'm going to have us say shout out. And in the holiday spirit, because this is the last episode before Christmas, I'm going to have us say shout out using your best Santa impression. Are you prepared for that?
Okay.
Got to get my bowl of jelly going.
Okay. So shout out to Elthanas, Greg TheDarkKnight Kettering, Caleb Togi Crawford, Nick, Stephen Thomason, and Jessie Blu. Shout out! I think that was about as good as we could muster after an exhausting conversation about Cyberpunk.
I'm feeling energized.
Are you?
I don't know.
Are you?
Yeah,
Okay.
I don't know. I feel like we've had a good conversation about
Oh, no, it was a
Cyberpunk
really
so
good
far.
conversation. It was a really good.
Yeah.
I think I'm really happy with how it turned out. I'm just ready to go to sleep, I think is what I'm also saying.
Looking at my waveform, I'm worried that Blood didn't get a chance to talk enough. But I always feel like that.
Yeah. No, I worry about that too, especially as somebody who tends to dominate conversation. But I think when Blood chipped in, it was very good.
Well, it's like his 10 words. It's incisive.
Right.
Laser focused.
But you know
I
what?
ramble on and on.
Let's give Blood a greater chance to talk. Let's talk about PixelJunk Eden 2.
Yeah.
I also played this.
Oh, okay.
So... Sorry, Blood.
Yeah. I jumped into it just last night. I really loved the first game, and it's like I've always thought of it, particularly when it came out on PS3, because there weren't a lot of artsy indie games to look at that point. I always felt like I could put this on a monitor in an art gallery somewhere and be in a different room with a controller, and people wouldn't realize it was a video game. But it's this mix of just just kind of like all of this abstract visuals paired with trancey music, and then I guess it's you would classify it as a platformer broadly, but it's it's really more about just kind of getting into that zone and watching you play as this little thing called a grimp.
That's a good word.
Yeah. It's like a shrimp that grips, I guess.
I was wondering how they came to Grimp. Yeah.
Yeah, and so you kind of have this little spool of silk, and then you spin around and you break apart this pollen, and then the pollen that you touch flows into the closest seed, and then you touch the seed and it grows into a plant, which is essentially a platform, and then that's sort of how you move around this world. The two, it's weird because in some ways it's not that different, in other ways it's very different. And the difference mostly comes down to the structure. So a lot of it looks the same and has the same vibes. But the first game gave you just these really gigantic sprawling levels. And essentially you're collecting these things called spectra, which look kind of like flowers, but think of them like a star in Mario 64, right? And so you can kind of see like a pulse that comes from off screen, and like, okay, there's a spectra off in that direction, and you sort of work your way and spin your way over to that spectra, and then you hit the spectra, and you get basically booted out of the level, kind of like in Mario 64. Whereas in 2, it's a lot more like segmented, and I think maybe even like randomly generated. So you find the different Grimps. They've like made little characters out of them with different, like one guy's into music, another guy's into art, and that kind of thing. And each Grimp they like basically roll the dice and like, okay, these are the kinds of environments you're going to be in. And then for each one of those levels, like you get one spectra, and then you can't go back into the level again. And then you go to the next one, and then once you've done 2 or 3 levels, then you go to another Grimp, and the process kind of repeats. So it's a lot more contained in a way. And the other way that it's more contained like that is because before, one of the things that I have a really struggle with is I feel like they've done a lot of things here to make the game less frustrating, but they also changed the feel of the game.
I was going to ask you about that. Does it control differently? Because it feels way different, and I'm not sure why.
Yeah, it feels like the first game, I felt like there's a lot more of a sense of momentum to your swing, so you kind of had to like find a way to fling yourself up in a direction in the right way.
Yeah.
And like gather speed and like, all right, if I go around enough times and then let go. Whereas in this, it's like you put your silk out, and then it like just kind of automatically goes out and does like a circle, and then you just kind of push the direction you want to go, and you're going to go that way, like, pretty automatically, I would say.
It just to chime in and agree, like the first game felt really good to play, and I find this one I didn't like it. It didn't feel right.
Yeah.
So I kind of gave up on it after like 2 or 3 or 4 levels.
Yeah, so it's almost like if you like got rid of like, if you had like Spider-Man but without like that pendulum of the swing.
Exactly.
That again, the momentum, that in and out.
They took out the zipping.
Yeah.
That's exactly what they did. They took out the zipping. Shit.
And then the other thing that I think limits it a bit is, so like I said, like the original had these big sprawling levels where you go to all these different parts and climb higher and higher to get to different spectra. But in the process of doing that, you could shoot yourself out in a direction and miss platforms and just fall and fall and fall. And, maybe you would eventually catch yourself, or maybe you'd fall all the way to the ground. Whereas in this, if you fall like a screen and a half, then it like stops and like respawns you at the point where you fell from.
And there's a time limit now.
Yeah,
you lose time.
I think there might have been a time limit before.
Okay.
I'm not 100% sure.
You lose
on the
time when
limit.
you die. Like,
oh, okay.
Yeah.
And there's checkpoints where you get your time
when you get to
restored.
a checkpoint, yeah.
But the thing with falling off the screen is, again, that same kind of back and forth of like, okay, well, this is in some ways less frustrating because I'm trying to get somewhere. I don't have to like work my way back up through platforms I've already been through. But in the other way, on the same token, or on the other side of the coin, whatever I'm trying to say. In the original game, falling all that way, you might not go back to the thing you're going to, but you would discover something else.
Right.
You would go in a different direction. You would see something else that would be interesting. Whereas this is, again, there's only one spectra in a level anyway, so you just kind of go to it. And maybe I'm wrong that there's only one spectra to a level, but it feels that way.
That was my impression, but yeah, I don't know. Yeah, it feels much more claustrophobic than the first game, which is strange. And more segmented and more structured, which, and just because it doesn't feel as good to play, I was kind of bummed out. I really love the PixelJunk games, kind of all of them, and this one just the feel is wrong. I wonder, maybe you can change the controls to be like PixelJunk Eden 1. I wonder.
Kind of don't think you can, but yeah. But yeah, Ian, it's interesting you're saying you're bounced off of it because like I've been sort of in the opposite camp to where like I don't want to just like knee-jerk reactions like, oh, this is bad because it's different.
Right. I don't want to give the impression that I like, there are games that I like hard quit. This one I just like stopped playing and haven't gone back yet, but I'm not like vehemently against this game or anything.
Well, it doesn't even sound like it's bad because it's different. It sounds like it is kind of disappointing because it's taking something that you liked and kind of like smoothing out the edges in such a way where it's less memorable or just fun to engage in. And that's weird, I think, no matter what, but I think it's especially weird in kind of this more artistic, abstract game that you're talking about, that it would like, I don't know.
What it feels like, Ben, is a producer had some notes and they were coming from the right place, but in doing those notes, they accidentally removed the game feel.
This reminds me of Dead Rising, where like people complained about the time limit, and so they took it out, and like you can kind of understand where they're coming from, but it wasn't a real solution. It just made it worse because the people that did like that stuff, it just upset them. Like it was not a solution. It was just like an edit, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. What I will say though is, despite having this conflict in my head about some of the gameplay, I still really like, it's a good thing when you need to chill out. When you just need to like let whatever frustrations have been going on in the week, like just get into this and like let the flashing lights and the trance music just like put you in the zone, you know, and do the little repetitive tasks. Because like I still I think it's one of those things, and this is probably true of just like trance music in general, but it's like you can like play it too long and be like, all right, this is getting tiring. But I'd say for like, you know, 30 minutes to an hour, like it gets you in a real good place.
You know what that sounds exactly like? Tetris Effect.
For sure.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with what Blood just said. Like it doesn't feel bad. I don't want to give that impression. It's just I really liked the way that one played, and something felt weird about this one, and I'm not even sure exactly what. That's kind of all I meant. But it's definitely a very pretty game, and very chill game. Speaking
of things that are chill, Ian, you've said that Grindstone is very chill.
Grindstone, dude, it's getting hard now. It's getting definitely difficult. But I'm in World 2, and I'm like, okay, I can see where this is headed. But yeah, Grindstone, they just dropped it during the latest Nintendo Indie Mini Direct, whatever it's called, and it's by Cappy, I think. And it's got a really fun graphical style. It looks like a match 3 game, but it kind of isn't. So the way it goes is you're this like warrior guy, and you're trying to get up this mountain, and each level, each stopping point on your journey up is this little grid of monsters. And so, and all the monsters are different colors, and you can only move through the same colored monsters and slice them down unless you've previously gotten a chain of 10 or more, because then that drops a gem, and the gem allows you to change colors mid-course. So then you start to combo where you go like a whole bunch of blues, gem, a whole bunch of yellows, you know, and then they slowly introduce items like, and that the monsters will start to get mad and attack after your turn after a while. And you've got 3 hit points, at least I do right now. And so you can have like a shield that'll block their attack, or you can have a sword that does like a spin and win right around you. Stuff like that to really use in surprisingly strategic ways sometimes. And when you clear them, you know, they drop down more from the top. And then they introduce like destructible boxes or boss creatures that take a certain number of, you have to have your attack power up to a certain level. So like one guy, it doesn't matter what color you're coming from, but you need to have a chain of 10 before hitting him. And you see the number of your chain above your head and in the corner. Or like a box, you need to have at least 3 power, but then it takes that back down. So you get into situations where you're like trying to route in the most kind of elaborate way to get your number up to what you need it to be to open a treasure chest or kill a boss or do whatever. And they introduce lots of funny little strategy stuff. And so it's a really strategic kind of puzzle game that has really chill kind of vibes to it. I found that it's really fun to just play at night in bed while I'm like watching YouTube videos or something. And then in between levels, you can unlock blueprints and stuff and go back to the inn, which you unlock more and more floors of it. And, there's a saloon at the top where you can heal your missing hearts. There's a workshop that can build like a sword or a shield or whatever for you. And some of them recharge between battles, and some of them you have to put more like gizzards or hearts or whatever into to charge back up again. So there is like a bit of progression to the game as well as you're climbing up this mountain and solving puzzles and fighting monsters. Yeah, that's the brass tacks about Grindstone. It's a cute game.
Yeah, and it just visually it looked really, really impressive in the Nintendo Direct.
I like the style.
Just like a lot of value there. This may not be accurate, so this may be a poor question because I haven't played the game, but there are 2 things thinking about a game like this that I'm like, okay, this is something I could potentially run into that would be a problem. And the first is, like you were talking about, sort of routing out different strategies and stuff. That can be really fun, but I also think you can run into situations where like you get to a stage and you're like trying to figure it out, and then you do figure it out, but by the time you figure it out, it's too late. And so then you just have to go do it again. And it's frustrating because you're like, wait, no, I figured it out. And like the replaying of it isn't that exciting because you're just waiting to apply a solution. You know what I mean?
So far, I totally know what you mean. So far, it's avoided that feeling because what you do in step 1 or 2 changes the entire layout of the board. And so if you do a different thing, the situation changes, you know? Mm-hmm. Like the boards definitely have a setup when they start. I'm not sure if they start with the same colors in the same places or not, but they definitely have like rocks in the same spots and stuff like that. So the layout is definitely a conundrum. But I haven't found that I've had that particular complaint. There's another kind of an element to this is kind of like a push your luck kind of a thing where since you only have 3 hearts and the monsters get progressively angrier as you go, because like if you leave a monster there for more than a turn, it starts. I think it's 1 turn, and then it'll start to want to attack back. And if you hit left trigger, you can see danger zones. And the longer you go without clearing enough monsters, after a while, almost everybody's been on there for more than a turn. There's no safe place to go. The incentive for staying in a level longer is you get more gems, which are used for unlocking other items and stuff like that. And you can get, like, I had a level where I had like 300 something gems, and I couldn't get to the exit because if you die, you lose them all. So there's definitely that kind of push your luck element where it's the decision comes down to like, okay, I got the crown, the treasure chest, and I opened the door. Should I just leave, or should I try to push it and get more materials? And I find it's a fun kind of give and take there. I think I've died like twice maybe so far, and it's not soul crushing or anything, you know. It's pretty light, but yeah. So it's avoided that problem for me. And usually on levels that I've failed, I go back and just destroy them. Not because I feel like I know the solution, but because I kind of understand better what the conundrum of that level kind of was, you know?
I feel like...
So I just know how to approach it better.
I feel like you completely answered my second question, which is like, for all of the, different sort of twists that it throws your way, is it ever a problem where it's like fundamentally you're still playing sort of like a matching game, right? Like, does that become repetitive on its own? And it sounds like there's just so much going on that that's not really an issue.
And there's a reason that matching games are so successful and popular, right? They're just kind of satisfying. So
yeah,
I don't think there's something wrong with that, really, but
no,
it's definitely a unique spin on a matching game. And I haven't played a matching game that has this exact bare mechanic of one color, get an item that you previously unlocked, different color, So I don't know. I find it interesting. Who knows how long I'll go on it. I've been playing it pretty consistently the last like 3 or 4 nights.
How much? Do you happen to know how much it is? I kind of want to check this out.
I believe it was $15.
Hey, that sounds pretty good to me.
Top of my head, I think that's what it was.
Okay.
Apologies if that's off by a few dollars.
I want to be careful with this next thing that we're going to talk about, because we're going to have a spoiler mode that goes into it, and I have not seen the last episode yet.
I haven't seen Mandalorian. Don't spoil me.
Yeah, no, I haven't either. And so I want to refrain from spoilers because I enjoy it so much. But I do kind of want to talk a little bit about the Mandalorian.
Don't look at me, Bloodworth.
Yeah, Blood has seen it. Blood has seen the last episode.
I'm watching it after this.
This is his on guard face.
This is your warning, Blood.
Yeah, I have to talk about this tomorrow. So yeah.
But yeah, so I don't want to like belabor the point or take anything away from the spoiler mode. I just wanted a space to say that I love this show. And
best Star Wars.
What's that?
Best Star War.
Yeah. I mean, I think both this and Fallen Order have really ignited and made me passionate about Star Wars again in a way that I was not and was kind of cynical about. But, I'm not going to say anything here that hasn't already been said, but I do kind of want to speak my piece of it's so refreshing that the show is accomplishing two things at once, where it's telling a new story with new characters and making them likable on their own merits, while also not feeling completely disconnected from this broader universe that it has purposefully set itself in, and actually manages to move forward that universe in a meaningful way that feels like it's consequential to whatever stories come out after this. That is such an impossible line to walk.
Oh, yeah. And it, like, so many episodes, like, first shot, and you're just like, oh, yeah, this is cooler than 6/9 of the movies. Like, already.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. Well, the last episode that I watched, episode 7 of season 2, it was funny because, I've been watching the episodes with my wife, and we knew that Bill Burr's character was going to be in it. And I was like, the episode that Bill Burr was in was really good. I liked that episode a lot, but I don't really care about him as a character all that much. So like getting reunited with him wasn't like a huge deal to me. Like it was fine. I wasn't against it, but it wasn't like jump up and down exciting. And the episode was so good and fleshed him out so incredibly well that now I'm on a completely opposite end, where the next time that he comes around, I am going to be jumping up and down, which I think speaks to the quality of this show.
Yeah, the season 1 episode with him, I thought like had some pretty cheesy moments, like cool ideas, but was really cheesy. And his character, was just kind of like, I'm like, it's a comedian. What's happening? But I fully agree. Now I'm like, wow, that character rules.
Yeah. Blood.
Yeah, I think for me, it's interesting because I haven't watched a lot of the expanded universe stuff. Like I'm probably now going to dig into Clone Wars and stuff after watching this.
I've been thinking about it.
Yeah. But it's interesting that despite that, like, these characters showing up is still exciting.
Yes. Oh, I love that. I love that. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, like I don't know anything about certain characters. I won't say who, other than I know they're in, other shows or whatever. But I'm already just like, yeah. Like Hope they come back soon. Like, cool.
So I am going to say an opinion that I imagine some people will get mad at me about. That's okay. So I talk about all the time how I want to be shown, not told things, and I do think that is very important. And I think that that's something the Mandalorian has done really, really, really well. I don't super love that it hasn't elaborated in greater detail about Mandalorian culture. And I don't think it needs to be super heavy-handed about it. And obviously it has alluded to things and shown things that do make certain aspects clear. But I think Mandalorian culture is complicated enough, and they kind of talk around things to the point where I don't think a lot of the audience is familiar with it. And I do think it is an aspect of the show that I wish they addressed just a little bit more directly with where we are in the show.
I agree and disagree, kind of. Like, I definitely think that they're making big hints that they're going to definitely dive into that in further seasons, especially the episode with Katie Sackhoff's character in this.
Yes.
And like the how to discuss it without spoiling it, but like the revelation that she gave us about our Mandalorian and like his kind of mindset about certain things kind of turned things on its head a little bit.
Right.
In a very interesting way. And I think that so far it's been handled in a way that, like, you know, like show don't tell is definitely the rule. And if you are living in a world where you're talking to another Mandalorian, like they're not going to, it wouldn't work for them to just suddenly start talking about the histories, you know?
Right.
And obviously I know that they would do it in a more elegant way, but so I want to know more. I think we're going to know more. I think we're going to delve into it a lot, but I also like super appreciate that it's been more just of a lore thing, and because it's their own past, like they know it.
It's funny because I can't remember any other time, especially in recent memory, where I've had this criticism, because I agree. I even say it in the Cyberpunk review, like how good it is that people talk as they actually would in this world, and I do think that is important. But I think when it comes to, there's kind of like a compounding problem, I think, with the Mandalorian culture, where you have a character that is shaped entirely by a creed. And so I think having an explicit understanding of that creed is important. And then it becomes even more important where people will be under the same name, but have completely different rules. And it's not that I don't think that they have explored this at all or made it clear at all. I think they have, but there's just kind of this like nebulous nature of it that can be a little bit frustrating to watch on screen. And I don't expect this to be a popular point of criticism or something that anyone else agrees with, but it's just something that's been eating at me a little bit. Despite
when it comes to like Boba Fett falls into the like Joker category for me, where it's like the less I know, the better. Like he's just a cool, crazy dude. Let him just be cool and crazy and out there and doing his thing.
Yeah.
Although seeing some of the stuff we saw this season, it was like I was like, wow, like this is awesome.
Well, the thing is like to kind of maybe back up my point a little bit better than I am. There is media out there that does go into detail about it. But I think with the way that this show is presented and how much of you can enjoy without that knowledge, like Blood was saying, characters coming in without you having that knowledge, I think it is the one aspect specifically like around the Mandalorians and their beliefs where I do think you would enjoy it more if they could include that information a little bit better. And like you said, Ian, maybe we're getting there. But yeah, I want to be really careful because I don't want to get into super spoiler territory, because I do think this show is so great. And I swear, like, it has gotten to the point where it is something that I look forward to, that I get excited about, that I cannot wait to watch. Like, and I am so grateful that I haven't been spoiled on it, because it has that really special place in my heart. And so when I say this criticism, I'm not trying to be like wagging my finger at it. It's just an observation that I had. And I think I could completely throw it in the trash because I am still enamored with this show. And something that I want to say is, I think a lot of people maybe didn't grow up with Star Wars, or it hasn't been part of their life forever, in the way that it has for many people, including myself. Or maybe they're turned away just with the intensity of the conversation surrounding Star Wars over the last decade. I think Mandalorian is so good that it kind of manages to separate itself from all of that. And if you're not already entrenched in Star Wars, I think this is a perfect entry point. And I had this conversation with my wife, and it was one of the best conversations I've ever had, where I have been trying to share Star Wars with her for a very long time. And it's not that she hasn't enjoyed it, and I don't want to frame it like she has, but she said to me, Mandalorian is, without a doubt, like the most I have enjoyed Star Wars. And it's like, well, why is that? And she's like, I feel like with other Star Wars things, I'm supposed to feel a certain way about it. Like, people have just talked about it so much, and it's so important, and it's such a cultural touchstone that, like, it's hard to come at it with your own feelings, right? Because you've just been so influenced by people talking about it to death forever. And I feel like with Mandalorian, characters are kind of their own thing enough that you can come to it with your own genuine feelings and kind of get excited about it as everybody else is excited about it. And I think that is so, so, so important. And it made me incredibly happy to hear that this is creating space for that. Because, like, I don't think you can watch episode 9, for instance, on its own terms. You know what I mean? Like It's kind of purposefully taking the entire legacy of this series and wrapping it into one thing.
Well, that's what's great about Mandalorian as well, is that I think it allows super ultra fans who know like legends and know all the extended universe stuff and like know every minute detail. Like, there's Easter eggs and super story payoff things in there for them that also just function for newcomers and medium level fans as well, just as well emotionally, because it's just well done storytelling. It's just like a super good video game, kind of. He's just like going on side quests as he's trying to do his main thing,
Yeah. And again, this is such a nitpick, but that is something that I noticed where like in the beginning and middle of the second season, it was like, yep, he's going to like meet somebody because he needs something from them, and they're going to agree to give him that thing, but first they're going to be like, no, you have to do something for me. And that is not an inherently bad structure, but I felt like it just used it like so much that it was a little funny.
Yeah, it's like
well, then the other kind
setbacks and then
formulaic kind of part of it is, it's almost like, well, the whole season, which I think we could like say is true of season 1, pretty easily, is like, this is assembling the party.
Yes.
And then it's like, okay, we get towards the end and like, okay, now bring everybody together.
Right. And there's always something that happens in the episode right before the last episode that's happened in both seasons now. It's really funny that it happened in the same episode, I think, in both seasons. Yeah.
Also, in both, like, maybe like a 90-10, like maybe 10% of it is like a little gross because it reminds you of the monopoly and dominance of this giant corporation. But also there's like 90% of you that is so grateful that it looks so good. But like the production value of the show is like hilarious. Like there are just moments where you're like, I can't get over how good this looks. Like this is movie quality level stuff, for this 8-episode season.
Thanks, Unreal Engine.
Wait, do they use Unreal Engine?
Do you not know how they make this show? It's fucking incredible. No. So they're basically on like a 360 giant television, like a wrapped screen. It's basically rear projection 2020. And it's got, they're rendering like backgrounds in real time on Unreal Engine, and it's tied to the camera so that it parallaxes correctly and it moves around, and they're literally shooting they're basically shooting green screen practically because it's being rendered and it's there. And like the screen is casting light on there's a really fascinating behind the scenes videos about it. It's truly fantastic stuff. Which is really funny because when you know that, you start to see like, you don't see the seams literally, but like you start to see like, oh, okay, here are the set elements, the things they're moving around amongst. And then everything beyond that is computer because the room is only like 2,000 feet wide or whatever.
That is so fascinating. I'm really glad that you told me
it's amazing. It's the most thrilling like filmmaking stuff I've seen in a while. It's very very cool
Where did
stuff.
you read up on this or watch this or whatever?
There are a few lengthy videos on YouTube about it. I think they put one up, and maybe Unreal put another one or two up.
Okay.
Basically, if you just search on YouTube like Mandalorian behind the scenes, like Unreal or like stage or camera.
So wait a minute. What you're saying is, to put it as simply as possible, Fortnite V-Bucks are reigniting my love of Star Wars.
Kind of, like sorta.
Okay. Thank you.
Like Fortnite made Mandalorian possible, kinda.
Okay. Blood, tell me about Fall Guys Season 3.
Yeah.
Staying on the Fall Guys train.
Jumping in there, we had a couple hours to kill before shooting today, and like, okay, well, I haven't been into Fall Guys yet. They just started the winter season, and I hadn't really. Actually, it's funny. It's like staying up with it. I hadn't really kept up with season 2 much. Like I think I might have popped in there like one day or something. But yeah, I played a couple hours season 3. A lot of wintry themed things. I've got a reindeer costume with some like, I've got like a skin that looks like green with like holly and stuff on it. And yeah, lots of new modes with like ice themes and snowballs and things like that. I think that there might be like a pretty like small set of new stuff, but then you can either play with just the new stuff or have it like mixed in with all the old stuff and all the season 2 stuff as well. So you can kind of set your playlist up that way. But there's Tundra Run that is kind of like one of your like standard obstacle courses, but there's a lot more of new elements in there. There's like fans that will like blow you around. They're like these springboard traps. So a fan will blow you onto a springboard and then it will launch you off the stage. Then there are like these like basically like boxing glove type things that like punch out from the sides or from below you. And then there's ski fall, which is like it's like skee ball, but with you going down this like ice chute and like jumping through holes, and then like you're trying to get into like the ultimate hole at the bottom, and basically whoever basically you rack, I think you have to rack up to like 15 points. Yeah, you need, there's like bronze, silver, and gold colored holes, and you try to get 15 points to qualify. And then the qualifying number always changes based on the amount of people you have at that point. And then Freezy Peak is interesting because it's like an obstacle course level, but rather than just like going like straight forward ahead, you're trying to kind of climb upwards. And so then you've got like snowballs falling down on you. You've got like these like spinning like treadmill things and stuff. And so it can be really easy to fall off of that. And then there's one with penguins that I haven't actually done yet that seems like it's kind of like a combination of like the tail game and the egg game. So you're like trying to grab penguins and like hold them for like the longer you hold them, the more like your score goes up. And then there's one. Okay, yeah, there's one with the only team game that I've seen. Well, is actually no, I think the penguin one's a team game too. But there's another team game that's like snowballs, and that one has been the hardest one for me so far, because your whole team is trying to roll your ball through these like hexes of snow that are on the board, and you're trying to get the ball up to 100%, and the first two teams that get to 100% survive, and then the other team gets knocked out. But it's crazy because it has those like punching boxing glove things that'll knock your ball across the arena. And I'm like, is that good or bad? Because on the one hand, it's like, okay, if it gets punched, then we've got to catch up to the ball and start rolling it again. But it also will like go over a lot of snow really quickly in that amount of time. And then the kind of final round is thin ice, which is basically it's like hexagon. But imagine if you took hexagon and you like just took all the stacks and like merged them together. So it's like right above the slime, and then there's like several layers of hexagon ice that kind of crack, and you fall through it. But you can, if you fall onto the next layer, you can still jump up to another layer that's next to you. So the strategy feels a little bit different because it takes a lot longer for them to disappear.
That's something that I'm really open to because I think that hexagon game just is an interesting one. But beyond that, the frustration that I have with Fall Guys is I really, really, really like it, but I always get super bummed out whenever I have to do a team game. Like the team games just drive me crazy because like you're doing really, really, really well. And this just maybe speaks to my personality as like kind of being like a lone wolf kind of character. But it just sucks when you feel like, oh, I'm losing because the team isn't doing what they're supposed to be doing. And like your great run is over. And then once you kind of get that like stigma in your head, you get bummed whenever those team games randomly come up. And like, it's kind of turned me away from Fall Guys to the point where like I just don't engage with it. I wonder if these new games are good enough or if this like new team game would be enjoyable in a way that I haven't experienced before.
Yeah, I'll say like I actually did like the other rolling ball one where, you know, you've got like the 3 lanes and you're going down and you're all trying to like push it in tandem, and then people have kind of that decision of like, well, do I like try to interfere with the other team or not? And it's funny because I feel like more often than not, the people that are interfering with the other team's ball like end up not pushing their own ball to the goal.
Right.
So this still has that kind of element to it, to where like other people will come and try to stop your ball and that kind of thing. But like I said, I'm still trying to figure out like how exactly the team strategy plays into pushing the ball around, because it just feels like, okay, well, if one person is pushing it this way, then I'm probably just going to, you know, just try to follow the momentum. Or if it looks like it's going to a place where there's no snow, then I'm like, okay, I'm trying to, you know, get on the other side. But it's interesting. Sometimes like the team games is almost like amalgamation of wills.
Yeah.
And it's like, why is that other team doing so much better? Like there's no teamwork that I can see to put into play here.
Yeah, there's just something in my mind where like even if I have a really bad run of something, like if I messed it up, that's like easier to swallow than being like, no, you guys aren't doing what you're supposed to be doing. Probably just a me thing. But I with the new cosmetics and really just Fall Guys in general, do you think that stuff is appealing enough to you that it's helping you drive your want to engage, or are you mostly just playing because it's fun on its own?
I'd say mostly because it's fun on my own, mostly because there's always that sense in Fall Guys that like, oh, I could have just done something a little differently, or I got robbed or whatever. So the kind of like that run back feeling. But I think that the cosmetics are pretty good, and there's just so much of it, you know, and like you see things that other people have gotten, and the reindeer, you know, just, yeah, I think there's something about getting dressed up for the occasion.
Yeah, absolutely.
That feels nice, you know, and I skimmed through like what's, you know, like the end game, whatever costume for the season. And it's like this walrus with like a top hat and a monocle. I'm like, okay, this is a really good skin.
Well, Blood, you may be getting dressed up for the season, but no one is ready for this HOTTAKE!
I'm sure I'm not.
I'm sure you're not. Of course, like many things in video games right now, it revolves around Cyberpunk. And I know you guys already talked about on the podcast kind of the refund situation and being pulled off the PlayStation Store, and all of that stuff is very, very, very interesting and worth talking about. But kind of what I got rolling in my head, and I'm not sure how to sort my feelings on, goes back to the opening question of talking about internet discourse and stuff. Because on one hand, like, I absolutely think people should be vocal about a product that doesn't work. But I also feel like more often than not, we kind of slip into this piling on situation where it's like everybody is aware of the problem. Everybody is like, knows how they feel about it. And then we just keep like kicking a dead horse. And that is also influenced by, you know, people's emotions, and then emotions fuel engagement. And then that like helps clicks and advertising and all that sort of stuff. And so it's also like a systemic like capitalist issue. But I don't always know how to feel about it, because sometimes I think something can...
Are we the cyberpunk all along?
I just think something can be just so saturated that it kind of makes you numb to it. And this isn't really so much a pointed question as much as it, like, how do you guys feel about it? How do you sort out your feelings?
I mean, I'm just sort of taking it as it is, you know. I mean, it's like we said, it's kind of easier for us to not be as bummed because we're playing on PC,
right?
You know, and we're not dealing with like the crazy issues that are on, you know, playing on a base PS4 or something. I could be wrong, but I trust that they will eventually finish this game. So there is that.
That's the hope.
Yeah. I think that they themselves are very disappointed with where this situation is. And so, yeah, it's an odd thing, you know, and you're talking about the discourse, and it's strange to see, you know, the pendulum swing so far from everyone, you know, being upset that people didn't score it highly enough to then everyone being upset that all those people scored it so high.
Right.
It's like, what's happening? And it's just, as we were kind of saying, it's like you just kind of have to take it for what it is. It's like, okay, this is a really highly ambitious game that still needs time in the oven. And so if you were one of those people that was going to wait, then good for you, because in 6 months you will probably not know what all the fuss was about.
Well, and like you said, Blood, like, it's an important moment to acknowledge our privilege in this regard. Like, all three of us have pretty decent PC computer like gaming rigs, you know,
right?
And like, that's because we're very fortunate to do the jobs that we do, and we kind of have to buy this kind of stuff. But it's a tax write-off, because it's like, it's business equipment that we need,
right?
But like, I'm putting myself in the shoes of someone who's been super waiting for this game, who has a PS4, you know, and like, how disappointed would you be? You know, it'd be devastating to wait for this game for 8 years, be super hyped day one, you got it, and it just is garbage. It's like broken mess.
Well, not even just that, but never really getting a transparent,
right,
this is how it's going to be beforehand. I think that's a huge part of it too.
And that is a huge part of it, because it's like, it is broken to the extent that there is no reasonable doubt. Like, there's no deniability. You had to have known that it was this catastrophic on these systems, because it is bananas. So yeah, it's pretty wild. And I mean, it's also wild that the announcement of Sony like doing these refunds was phrased the way it was, because my understanding was, Omar was telling me that CD Projekt Red had said like, we should pull it and do refunds, but then Sony like framed it like it was kind of their initiative or some weird thing.
It seems like
unclear.
The way that it's been communicated and the timing of things has kind of made it a little confusing to people, because basically Yeah, so first CD Projekt was saying like, hey, if you want a refund, go to, wherever you bought it and try to get something. But then it doesn't sound like they initially had communicated that with Sony, and Sony's
Oh,
refund policy is not great.
is
And so
almost non-existent.
yeah, so basically it's like if you have downloaded the game, then it takes a very extreme circumstance for them to give you a refund. Like they're just basically not going to.
All right.
And so that created all kinds of problems because CD Projekt is saying one thing and then Sony's customer support is like, what? No. Like this goes against the policy.
And then Sony pulled it at like midnight in Poland, and like so they didn't have a chance to talk about it even.
Well,
something?
I think that there was coordination between the two in order to come to this solution. But I think because of time zones and communication or whatever, Sony's announcement went out, and then a couple hours later, then CD Projekt's announcement went out. And so it made it look like Sony was just pulling the rug out from under them, but I think they actually probably did talk about it. But
and
I
then
think
you posted today there's a hot fix for PS4, so it's like, what's going on?
Yeah, so that's the thing is you can't buy the game on PS4, but if you own it, like you can download it. You're still going to get patches. All that stuff is still going to be supported.
Right.
And obviously you can still buy a physical copy. But yeah, so I think essentially what it comes down to though is Sony would rather pull the thing from the store than deal with changing its refund policy.
Right,
and they've
right.
set up this special program for Cyberpunk, but they're not very happy about it.
And it's exactly like what you said earlier. Like, no more release dates, man. Just just never tell anyone when your game is coming out ever until it's like literally finished and patched and perfect. And I know that you have to test things at scale in a lot of cases, but before you find out about these things. But I don't think this situation maybe was one of them.
I feel conflicted because it kind of reminds me of Mass Effect 3, where we kind of got to this point where it was impossible in sort of the immediate aftermath of that game to have a conversation and have the endings of that game not come into play. And I think the endings were the feelings that people had, I think, are coming from an understandable place. But the point that I think I'm trying to make is sometimes something can be so overwhelming that there's like no room to talk about anything else. And it's like, well, there's an entire other game here. There's so many other things to get into and discuss. There's so many different facets. But this one thing feels like it is defining in a way that is kind of taking all the air out of the room. And I'm starting to feel that with Cyberpunk, where it is hard to talk about other aspects of the game without talking about the state that it launched in. And on the other hand, it's like, I absolutely think people should talk about this and bring it to attention. But even like, think about all the detail that you went into, Blood, about this refund situation with Sony. It doesn't really feel like that detail is being represented. It's kind of just like, oh, haha, this game is just really, really broken. Like, I feel like it's being oversimplified and kind of spread to the point where, like, it's like you were saying, Ian, there's this need to be absolutely right in one instance where it's like, this is how we view this thing and you cannot view it any other way. And I don't think that that is healthy discourse. I think you should be able to acknowledge something like this while still allowing room to praise the things that it does well.
Well, it's funny because like we in the fandoms of games or Star Wars or whatever, we are all of us Icarus because like we just keep flying too close to the sun. We get overhyped on everything and then we get repeatedly burned and never learn our lessons. And it's just like, it's like, yeah, CD Projekt Red had this amazing pedigree. And like, how much erosion of trust has there been now? Like, how much of an impact will this have? I don't know. Like, I don't know the lasting impact. I keep thinking about No Man's Sky and Sea of Thieves and how like just like horrible the state of those games were when they came out and the discourse around them, and like, you know, the personal impact it had on those developers, and then those huge successes kind of that both of those have seen, and they're turning around. And it hasn't been perfect. It's been rocky sometimes, but obviously we've seen that this is very possible to right the ship.
I think the one difficulty Cyberpunk is going to have, though, is that it is a solitary single player.
Very true. Yeah.
One and done kind of game, whereas No Man's Sky and Sea of Thieves, like, you're going to get back into those because your friends are getting into those.
Right.
You don't have that dynamic with a single player RPG in the same way. So it's like it's going to rely on them bringing, significant new content to the game in one form or another.
Well, yeah, because that angry people on forums or whatever will just say like, well, the story sucks too, or whatever, and then like that's going to impact some people from playing it. Yeah.
I focus so much on the discourse of something because sometimes it feels like before Cyberpunk came out, I think there was rightfully a lot of talk about crunch, right? Mm-hmm. And like just people being put in ridiculous situations and working tirelessly. Like all of that is still true. Like these people worked tirelessly to... Well,
now they're probably crunching even further.
Right. And exactly. That's my point though. That's my point.
Never ends.
Is I feel like I worry that the conversation now is not like, how do we work better? It's, you should have delayed it, or you should have worked harder, or this shouldn't have happened. And I worry that is like superseding the initial problem with how this came to be. And what I'm trying to say is like, sometimes I think gaming communities send conflicting messages where it's like, we don't want you to work ridiculous hours, and we don't want you to crunch, and we don't want all these things to happen, but we will descend the wrath.
But why is your review so late?
Right, exactly. But that plays into it too, where it's like you want to have both things, but you're not willing to concede anywhere, right? Where it's like, you're not willing to concede waiting longer, or or whatever. It's like, I don't know. I just think sometimes the level of aggression that we say will promote worse workplaces for people, and it will create unhealthy atmospheres, both physically and mentally, for people if we don't try to tackle this in a way that is like good for everybody. And I think sometimes people are like, hey, I'm a consumer. They did something wrong. This shouldn't have happened. And I think like logically all of that stuff is true, but I don't think that being true gives you license to be like raging. You know what I mean? Like,
right.
Like just because all of that is true and you have a right to express your voice, the way in which you express it does have an impact and may only hurt what you want.
Right.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Like the social media and PR managers, like, they're bearing the brunt of like who knows how much nasty stuff they have to wade through every day, and all they can do is tell you what the other people have passed them.
Right.
It's like,
right.
Like their job is to just to like make this sound as acceptable as possible, but they're not actually making a lot of those decisions.
Right.
Well, and it's a funny thing because I keep trying to think like, I'm having a multifaceted thought here, so let me try to unpack it. But like, you want to say like, well, who screwed up? Like, whose fault is this? What went wrong? Mm-hmm. And I think on the one hand, what the games industry can learn from this, kind of like what we were talking about with Mandalorian before, is, and like the adage of screenwriting 101, show, don't tell. Maybe game companies just need to talk less about their games before they come out. Show them, put up a gameplay demo, do all that kind of stuff, but then don't go much beyond that. Don't talk about all the crazy, amazing things you're going to do in Cyberpunk, so that it just speaks for itself more, and you don't feel... I mean, obviously just seeing a thing, the human mind is going to extrapolate. But maybe that's just a small piece of the puzzle. Part 2 of this is the games industry, developers, companies need to get better at knowing their scale and knowing their limits and knowing what's possible and how long it'll take. And like Supergiant's a great example of that, where they were like mandatory no messages after 5 p.m. on Fridays, whatever, but they're also making like way smaller games with a smaller team. And it's like, that to me is a good example from what I can see from the outside of knowing your unit's capabilities.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. I think that CD Projekt falls into two pitfalls with that, in that one being that they're, aside from Gwent and Thronebreaker, which were kind of smaller side things.
Yeah.
Every game that they've set out to make is more ambitious than the last one.
Right.
So there's almost no telling like what the scale and the time frame is when that's your goal, is to
very true. You don't know always. Yeah.
Make one of the biggest, best RPGs ever. And then the other second pitfall is for at the level that they're aspiring to, they're not that big of a company.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
They're not Ubisoft. They're not Activision. They don't put out 6 or 8 games every year.
And yet, though, Bloodworth,
they haven't put out a game in years, and so they don't go through the cycle of launching a game and the pitfalls of launching a game. And this happened last time, so let's make sure the other teams know. Like, let's give them more space. Like, they have the team.
But like the third prong to that, Bloodworth, with CD Projekt Red is like, I can think of few games more advertised than this one. Like, I have a jacket for this game. I've seen billboards everywhere. Like, and I'm not even going anywhere, like,
yeah.
Like the carpet they rolled out at E3 was bonkers. Like, they built a bar, like, pump the brakes.
Well,
like,
those are 2 points that I actually kind of want to wrap together. And that is normalize things not working out. And I do think within the gaming industry, we have kind of gotten better at that, but also gotten worse, where if it is an independent game, right, or a game made by a couple of people, and they come forward and they say like, hey, we're not ready yet, or this is what we wanted and this is where we're at, I think people are like, oh, okay, I understand. Like, you're a small team or you're an independent project or whatever, and so I'm very sympathetic to that. And I think but that can also happen on a massive level. Right, that can happen with big games that are trying to, accomplish so much. I think we need to get to a point where both on a marketing level and on a consumer level, we need to create space for creators to come forward and say, like, we're not there yet. Like, this is what we thought we were going to be. This is where we're at right now. And like, I want to create space for people to say, like, we don't know when it's going to get better. And I think about Halo Infinite and the response that had, and I really appreciate the messaging of like, we are going to give it more time. Yeah. We're going to give it even more time than that. And I don't know if that's going to work out for them. I don't know the state of that game, but I think that kind of mindset is good. And I feel like with Cyberpunk, this thing got out the door when it wasn't ready. And I would have really appreciated like an honest and heartfelt, this is not ready.
If they had literally said like, hey, we know we promised we wouldn't delay it again.
Right.
We know you're going to be super mad.
Right.
But this game is broken.
Right.
Like, and we need more time to fix it. And we're very, very sorry.
But don't make that promise that you're not going to delay.
Well, don't promise anything in the first place.
Why make promises?
Right. And it's not...
Never promise anything.
Yeah, and it's fair to point out that they did delay it, and they did say it wasn't ready yet. But it comes down to that language, right? Where what they should have been doing is, rather than showing these trailers that it's like, it looks flawless and like you can't wait to experience this groundbreaking thing. Like, imagine if they were showing trailers where it's like, here's what we've got, and here's this guy T-posing. And it's like, I know it's not this simple, and I know it's not that straightforward, but I think that communicates a level of honesty that would have avoided this entire conundrum if we could get closer to that.
Well, the ironic thing with Cyberpunk being this lightning rod and how much they marketed it and how much money is behind this and how much was riding on hitting that date is capitalism.
Right.
And like capitalism being the enemy of a cyberpunk world and in our own reality. Like that's what's so ironic about this is because like they can't, like they're trapped for whatever reason. Like they had to put it out that date. They had to promise they wouldn't delay it again.
Right.
I don't know why. And if they didn't, they certainly should not have done that. But like, that's the wild thing about this is that there are so many moving parts, so many dollars, so many different departments, so many other companies involved that the machines very quickly at a game of this scale, I think, gets too big to stop.
Yes.
And like Microsoft is so big and Halo is so big that they can just be like, we're giving it another year, maybe more, because you're right, it looked bad. We're going to fix it. CD Projekt Red, like Bud was saying, this like middle-sized company with quadruple A-sized dreams, you know, that train has got no brakes after you announce a date, you know? Like, even if you delay it 3 times, like, you're going to crash into the mountain if you don't put it out, for better or worse. And I think that mentality is so flawed. And, like, whatever is the root of that in the gaming industry and in film and in artistic endeavors, you know, and I mean, it's capitalism, but it's not that simple.
Right.
You know? Because, like, if there was an endowment for the arts or whatever and people could just, like, put stuff out, you know? Like, it'd be a way different story. That's a whole different entire world, but
you're completely correct, Ian, because a lot of the issues that we're talking about extend well beyond Cyberpunk and get into like how the whole world functions.
Yeah.
And I think it is easy and even arrogant to like sit here on a podcast and be like, well, I wish this could happen, right? Because
all they have to do is not say a date.
Yeah, doing
well, like advertising contracts, just like the little bit of behind the scenes we get with, you know, our partners, and like, yeah, we're, you know, they're gonna upfront sell things for like all of next year, and like, and that kind of thing, you know, they're trying to lock that stuff in, and so that kind of thing is going on with Cyberpunk as well, you know, and like the crazy amounts of money. You know, they sent me these Rockstar, whatever. They sent me energy drinks, a box full of energy drinks, and I'm like, what am I going to do with this?
Right. I mean, that's a great example, Blood. What was it? Monster energy drink that had Halo on it.
Right.
That like
that was a deal.
Out. Yeah.
That was out because the game was supposed to be out. Like, there's so many intermingled things.
Death Stranding is like changing gameplay systems as a crossover. Like
the Halo Infinite Monster thing that went out is like poetic. It speaks to so much. I do recognize that we have the easy job here, and that the poor people at CD Projekt Red do not, and are I'm sure are going through so much. And I think it is important to be empathetic towards those people. You know, I think a lot of people spent huge chunks of their life giving everything to this game. And I don't think having that sympathy turns you into some sort of corporate defender. And it disgusts me that people confuse empathy with like obedience. It's not the same thing. I like, you can express disappointment and anger without also turning people into products, because they're not. You know, and
well, again, it's you can be dissatisfied with the product, you can be dissatisfied with the company, but you have to remember that human beings made that product and work at that company.
Yes. Are we ready for some emails?
Every time I get the football.
Are you ready for some football? Maybe that's why I say it. Maybe like subconsciously.
Is that why you say it?
I don't know. I don't know.
I think that.
but maybe. All right. Sorry, give me just 1 second. I cannot find this email that I want to address. Oh no! Oh, here it is. Okay, there we go. Okay, so our first email comes in from Liam. He says, "Hi, Ben and Allies. Watching everyone get excited over Cyberpunk has had me feeling a little left out. I'm finding myself unable to bring myself to purchase it over the various isms I've now associated with the game, from the puzzling depiction of ethnic groups that play straight gangs that the original board game was parodying to various transgressions made by CD Projekt Red. Additionally, gamers harassing reviewers who brought up critiques over these depictions, and a recent comment by a trans ally in the Easy A Patreon comments asking for more discussion and awareness on the topic. It's hard to dissociate this from the game. I noticed in your 30 hours impressions video it was not brought up at all. In contrast, I thoroughly enjoyed The Last of Us Part 2, despite being aware of the crunch culture. I believe because it had not crossed a mental line I had drawn in my head. My question is, how do you draw that line for games and treat media that you feel has gone too far? I know the easy answer is to say don't worry about it and keep it out of your head, but I feel it gets harder and harder to do with the more awareness of game development in recent years. Kind regards, Liam." So I absolutely want to open this up to Ian and Bloodworth as well, but this is something that I super want to address. Because going into the Cyberpunk review, I was very aware of the issues surrounding it and the concerns that people had, specifically over representation and even more specifically transphobia. And I guess whether you believe me or not, that is an issue that I do really care about. And it is an issue that I feel emotionally invested in. And so I went into my evaluation of the game with that on my mind. You know, it's not something that caught me off guard. I went in aware of it. And I think part of the reason you didn't see it in the impressions video is because if I was to make a statement on it, I really wanted to be sure. Again, I really wanted to take my time kind of with every aspect of this game. And this is hard to say because you always want to be careful in situations like this. But in my evaluation of the game, I do not find it transphobic. I am not saying that that is correct. I'm not saying that that is the only opinion. I don't want to shut down dissenting opinions. But I didn't think that this game had a prejudice toward any one group of people or a hatred or was trying to make a mockery of them in any way. And I want to go into that further by saying this game does intentionally represent people poorly, and I can see how that would be very uncomfortable. I think it's supposed to make you uncomfortable. In my read of the game, and I say this in the review, I think it is talking about you have this future where you can do anything. You can be anyone. And what you see in Cyberpunk feels regressive. And I think what that split is trying to represent is that just because we technologically progress further doesn't mean that we automatically become more progressive or we get better or that there is greater equality. And I don't think, and I did read other reviews. I wanted to get other people's opinions. And I saw that people were saying that they expressed disappointment in there not being, something to kind of counterbalance this cynicism or this representation, or that things should be represented a little bit more equally. And that was not my takeaway from it. I don't think in art you have to show something terrible and say to your audience, this is bad. Or I don't think you have to show something awful or represent a particular point of view and then go to represent all points of view. I think you can represent something in a way that everybody can connect to, even if you don't explore every single possible element of that thing. And in my read of Cyberpunk, it was a universal problem that I think we're dealing with today completely, where I think corporations super grossly try to stand for things that they don't really stand for, or it's hollow, or it's just a way to like make people cheer for them. And I think Cyberpunk exaggerates that kind of mentality that you see today to a much grosser and more clear-cut wrong degree. But I think it's doing that on purpose. And I think it like if you walk around Cyberpunk, it flashes like its grossness at you constantly, overwhelmingly, like it shoves it down your throat. And I think that is saying like, this is where we could get to, and you buy into it because it feels believable. Like you walk into somebody's home and the appliances that they have, it doesn't even feel like they own them. Like they have to spend money to like get food out of the appliance that they own. And it's like, I think there are so many elements of it like that, where like you don't even get characters commenting on it because they're so used to it. And I also think that is commentary in Cyberpunk, where we can just be so worn down by corporate machines that like there's no point in even saying anything about it anymore because it is just so pervasive. And anyway, I know that this is long and rambling and definitely an imperfect evaluation of the themes of this game and what it's trying to say. And again, I'm not saying that I'm right, but I walked away from Cyberpunk thinking I don't believe this is transphobic, and I don't think it is trying to maliciously attack any one particular group. And I thought to myself, like, I definitely don't want to express those feelings to get people to like applaud to me in a reactionary sense. I don't want to say something that I don't believe just because people would like it. And I don't like that sometimes it feels like that is where the conversation leads, where you have to say something, or you have to say something a certain way in order for people to consider your point of view. And I absolutely think that there should be space to discuss these things, but sometimes I think we let a mob mentality take over to the point where there is no nuance left.
I think, yeah, that was well said, Ben. I think like it is, as all things, you know, there's a very not bipolar, but like extreme 10 or 1 kind of mentality in culture right now, where either something's canceled or it's exemplary,
right?
You know, and I think that that's a reductive view. I think that I do not think that Cyberpunk is intentionally hostile. As you said, I don't think it is. I think that its shortcomings are more through ignorance than anything else. I think it's the same as with issues like white privilege or things where it's like pitfalls that people fall into without knowing that they're making these mistakes. Like they don't even realize. And so like, yeah, issues of LGBTQ are the things I'm most familiar with. And I kind of agree. Like so far I haven't seen too much that's like, I haven't seen anything like overtly mean in the game so far. And like the example that came up before the game was out was that advertisement for Chromaticore drink, whatever, the Mix It Up, where there's a trans woman who has like a large penis and it's like sexualized. Her genitals, you know, are sexualized on the thing. And like, I actually kind of liked the artist's defense of that, is like, they basically said like, this is a shitty corporate world where everyone's body is commodified and sexualized. So would trans bodies and queer bodies would also be. And so like that I buy. Like that I think is true. And that's the element of Cyberpunk that I really like in a weird way, is that everybody is a target for commodification and exploitation in that kind of way. Like they're going to charge you their dollar and they don't care who you are. Like there's a strange equality to that. Where I think that Cyberpunk falls a little flat is in this regard is it leans on stereotype pretty heavily, and I think that it there's a sense in a lot of great Cyberpunk stuff that everything is commingled to an extent that like it's really kind of a melting pot kind of mentality, and like it not in an erasure kind of a sense where it's like we need to homogenize everything, but more in like a things commingle a little bit more. Whereas in this, things seem pretty segregated. Like you've got the gang that talks like this and looks like this. You've got the gang that talks like this and looks like this. You've got the corporation who talks like this and looks like this. And like I've seen a lot of comments about Orientalism with this game, and I think that those arguments are valid. Like, and that's outside of my experience, and it's not really my place to say like, no, you're wrong. Like,
right.
The thing I read said that like every Japanese character has a heavy Japanese accent, and that wasn't even something I had really procced until they said that, and I was like, oh wow, yeah, that's pretty much true, like from what I'm seeing here. And like on one hand, it's like, did they just pick a Japanese company to be the villain, and so it really seems like that? Or is this part of the kind of Western Orientalist fear of Chinese and Japanese companies kind of coming in and taking over? And like that's definitely a thing that's present in sci-fi and in Cyberpunk and has been problematic in the past. And so like I can't say that this game sidesteps that pitfall. And also I saw a very, very true point about and this is something I'm kind of disappointed about too, even throughout the game, because I kind of thought I could like change up my body and stuff throughout the game, you know. Like it's kind of weird, like why put genitals in the game if you can't like you know, not explore them, but like, you know, if it doesn't matter. And like I'm playing as a female voice, female body presentation, you know, but like I have underwear on even if I'm naked in the game, but not in the menu, which is weird. And like I thought that this game, you know, going in, I love Cyberpunk as a genre, and I might let my fancies get away with me, but I thought like, hey, like maybe since they said that they're trying to destigmatize nudity and sexuality and stuff, I'm like, okay, and you can play a pre-op trans person or a, you know, physically in this game. And like I was like, okay, maybe you can like even keep playing around with that throughout the game, like change your genitals on the fly, like get really into it. And I'm a little disappointed that you can't do that kind of stuff. And I do think that pronouns being tied to which voice you pick is definitely a bad thing. My theory for this, don't know if this is true, but my theory for this is that they've been working on this game for so long, and they'd been recording all the voice lines for so long. They'd only been doing a he and she variant, and that was before all the heat they got for their transphobic tweets from GOG or whoever did that, which I'm not excusing. That was fucked up. But like that happened too late for them to realize their problem.
Yeah.
And I think that they, you know, they should still to this day put in like a toggle of just like, which pronoun do you want to use? Because I think that would be the way they could fix it. Alas, they're not going to be able to probably record every voice line with a pronoun in it to add a gender neutral variant. It just seems impractical with this many voice lines. It'd be very expensive and too late. But like the other thing I saw though is that you can't change, like the character creator is kind of limited in a weird way, and you can't change your body type. You have to be this like traditionally, quote unquote, traditionally beautiful, fit physique, you know, like, and there is kind of an intrinsic, body shaming kind of aspect to that too, where it's like, okay, I guess I can't have a certain kind of weight or anything in this game. And like that's something as well. And like I said this in one of the podcasts or something too, it's like from what I've seen of CD Projekt Red, they seem like a kind of company that's reactionary, like reactive to issues like this, because I think they don't think about it until someone tells them they have to. Again, I can't super back that up, but that just seems to be the situation so far. And I mean, when it comes to LGBTQ stuff, Poland isn't great about that. Like, there are protests and stuff happening even very recently in Poland about that issue specifically. So it is kind of an interesting thing to have a game coming out of a country that is having super big issues with that right now, and to hold them to this big standard. And that's not to say America is all that great about these kinds of issues either, because it's not. But certainly not the world leader. But it's interesting, and I don't want to get into like some kind of like nationalist argument where it's like all people from this place are like this, because obviously that's not true.
Right.
But it is an interesting thing to have real life political, social things happening in a country that made a game that has a discourse surrounding it involving the same issues. Coincidence or not, like it's definitely just a thing that's happening. And so yeah, the game is not perfect. It definitely has a lot of problems in this area. And like you said, Ben, like Cyberpunk intentionally plays with these ideas.
Right.
I think that going into this, I think I said earlier, like I did not anticipate CD Projekt Red just because of their track record and my hesitancy about, like they've had some questionable tweets and stuff in the past. So like, I did not expect a nuanced take or thoughtful take on these subjects necessarily in this game. I had hoped for one. I had hoped that they'd like hired up a bunch of people of different life experiences that might influence, where the game went. I don't know if they did or didn't, but definitely the game has its issues. But what I've seen so far, and I've been looking, nothing has really tipped me far enough to say like, this is egregiously terrible. And again, that's from my place of privilege, and I don't see everything because I'm not aware of everything.
Right.
There's one
Super
character, a
important to say.
doctor. There's a doctor character that is definitely like very queer presenting, and the characters that you see them with are not nice to them, but they're kind of a bastard of a person. So it's kind of unclear if they're calling this person despicable because of how they present or just what they do, because like they're not an upstanding citizen necessarily. So like that was the closest part where I was like, why are we hating this guy necessarily, And I think it's because he's despicable, not because he's queer.
Right. That was absolutely how I read it. Yeah.
Yeah, they don't specify a pronoun that I can recall in the game. So sorry, I slipped around between them, but like yeah,
there is
it definitely, yeah. I could go on, but I think I've said everything and I'm just going to start repeating myself.
There's a lot that I agree with there. But there's a point of comparison that I want to make, and to maybe start this, I think it is important to acknowledge and recognize that representation could be better, but I think you can do that while also recognizing the good things that something does. And in Cyberpunk, there was actually, in my read of it, some commentary that I thought was better than a lot of other games, because I think what you get with most games is you get the Ubisoft problem. And a comparison here is Watch Dogs Legion, which you may have forgotten, but also tells a story of corporations being evil and you rising against it. But you don't even really think about it when you're playing, because it just feels like every edge of that is completely sanded off to where, on one hand, it doesn't upset anybody, but it also just says nothing. It is just disposable. And I am by no means saying that Cyberpunk is flawless, but I do think there's actually like an interesting kind of duality to how Cyberpunk represents itself that feels like it is a little bit deeper than your typical AAA garbage. And what I mean by that is when you walk around on the streets of Cyberpunk, I really do think there is a broad, diverse array of people, different people of different body types, people of different ethnicities, but beyond that and unique to this world. And I do think it is a good point to bring up that I don't think it is trying to represent what our future will be. I do think it is fictionalized on purpose. But you do really see a lot of diverse array of people, and not only do those people different physically, but cybernetically, they're very, very different. I mean, you have people that have all different parts of their body changed. And among these groups of people and among these conversations, they don't make that a point of difference. It is not something that they will attack each other for. There is an acceptance of it. But when you compare that to how ads represent people and represent things, these advertisements are saying all you want is something that can please you, like sexually or socially. Like in every instance, it is saying to the society that it is selling to, you only want the most stereotypical representation of what you can be. And I think that is in contrast to the people that you meet and you interact with. And that is why I think it is important when I say these people that you get to know, you really get to know them. And they feel like three-dimensional characters, regardless of how they represent themselves ethnically or sexually. And I think that says a lot more than something like Watch Dogs Legion. And I don't think Cyberpunk is perfect. And I do think it is valuable to talk about its shortcomings, which definitely exist. But
and even I might have been guilty of at the very least worrying about this, like cynically thinking of CD Projekt Red as, well, cynical and insensitive and unwilling to explore these kinds of topics. But like we've said a few times throughout this podcast, like their subtlety and nuance when it comes to characters and like the funeral scene, like different people from different walks of life at this funeral mourning this person.
Well, and even when that starts, before you actually get to the scene, asking the relative, because they're from a different culture than your character, like how does this work? It's almost like an educational kind of thing. Like I'd have to look into, like, does this actually reflect real world traditions? But it feels like you're getting walked into something that you're not familiar with.
Absolutely. And so like that, it's a great example of that they're not just cynical monsters telling this emotionless story, right? Like as much as I cynically might have feared they were, right? Like the issue is, it's sometimes hard to tell, especially with a world like this, where is the line? Like an example, like you were talking about, like, is everyone skinny and quote unquote traditionally attractive because it's this Black Mirror-esque homogenized cyberpunk nightmare where like everyone has body modded themselves into oblivion because that's the ideal? Like, is that a statement that's being made? And the reason I'm not sure is you can't make the choice as a character to go against that on purpose. You have to conform to that too. And so that for everything, I'm like, well, clearly they're making a comment on this. There's a little tiny part of my brain saying like, but are they always? To
an extent, but even in what you're saying, you're only talking about it from a physical perspective. And the character that you play, which is different from a lot of the other characters that you see, is that you also have a voice. And so while you may be physically limited to certain aspects, what you say and how you treat people, you are still given an option there. And that doesn't mean that there shouldn't be more variance physically, but I think it is important to bring up that you have other opportunities of expressing yourself, and that can be valuable in its own way.
I wonder if they don't seem to have much impact on gameplay. Like, you can't be like, there's no like renegade or positive path, right? I can't be like outwardly
No.
mean to people. It doesn't seem to make a difference.
Yeah, you're right, but like there's a moment where a character asks how you feel about God, and although it did not like matter in a gameplay sense, I still was like, I appreciate that it's covering a lot of bases here, and that I as a player can choose how do I feel about this, right?
Nice.
And so I think that's what I'm trying to get at is I like, okay. I think one of the biggest problems plaguing our world today is, as much as possible,
We're really getting into it.
It is beneficial to money to represent things as simply as possible, to take entire groups of people and say they are like this. You should be against them or you should be for them. And
lowest common denominator.
Right. I think in its own exaggerated way, Cyberpunk is making commentary on that, where once you actually get to know somebody, they are far different than the world surrounding them, which is trying to reduce them as much as possible. And I think that is a powerful message for everybody, because money does not care about your identity, and that is a problem. And I don't know. I think it gets back into the piling on and all of this stuff where like we should neither like accept these things entirely at face value and beyond the hype train completely and treat these products like they are the second coming of Christ in all circumstances. But on the flip side, I don't think we should fully condemn them without trying to experience them and trying to have a sympathetic view from where they're coming from. And I don't think doing that makes you a terrible person.
Well, and also, like, if you buy a game, Cyberpunk or anything, if you buy the game, play it for 40 hours, and then something transphobic or something happens, and it's too late for you to get a refund, like, that doesn't make you a bad person.
Absolutely.
For inadvertently supporting this thing. Like I said, I'm only 24 whatever hours into this game. There could be some egregious, crazy shit I don't know about down the line, Like, who's to say? But if that happens, I'll talk about it. Like I will make a comment on it. And but it's definitely like, obviously, like, it's our job to play Cyberpunk, basically. Like, we all kind of have to at least dip into it because we have to talk about it next month for Goaties. But like, even if it weren't, and you're curious about trying a game, or if you would rather not, like, that's your choice.
Yeah.
And like, that's up to you. And if you decide against it, like, there's no shame in that. And if you do it and then find that you were wrong or wish you hadn't, that's just how the cookie crumbles sometimes. Like, sometimes you make a mistake, you spend money on something that you turn out not to like, even if it's not offensive. Like, I've bought hundreds of games over my lifetime that I just didn't like.
Well,
and
I think that
yeah,
you're speaking to, a product that does not define you. And I think throughout,
you are not your fandom.
Right. Exactly. And I think and all of the things that we've talked about, like that is a cultural problem that we have. Is it is beneficial to these products that you do define yourself through your fandom, and that is that can fandom can be incredible, of course, but that can lead to very unhealthy things.
And like, again, like we've talked about, like, that discomfort with something just being fine.
Yes.
Is very interesting to me in our society right now.
Right.
Like, why is that such a hard concept for people? Like, why do you have to hate The Last Jedi or love it? Like, why can't it just be like, it had some nice parts, it had some dumb parts, overall the trilogy really fucked it. But like, like, or what? But I'm not like mad about it. Like, that's the thing, is like, I don't get it. Like, everything's a 7, it's fine. Like, just cool it. I don't know.
I think we're just gonna do one email today.
I'm gonna pass out, man. We really got into it.
We really got into it. Thank you for watching.